Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Today, we're going to go over a couple different videos, and I might go over another one, part of the Christine Ann Lawson audiobook on borderline personality disorder. I definitely want to go over more of that in the future, but in this episode today, what I definitely want to go over is friend of the channel, Christian John. He made a super popular TikTok about borderline, and I'm going to break that down a little bit. I'm also going to break down a short clip that Dr. Ramani made as well. But before I get into that, if you're here, please remember to subscribe to the channel. If you're not already, a lot of people watch that are not subscribed. And remember to like the video if you do indeed like the video. Mac, what's shaking there, my man? So I'll be watching Christian John. He's got a little TikTok about BPD that somebody wanted me to break down. And then I'm going to go over something that Dr. Ramani said. And then we'll take it from there. Hey, I only started a minute ago, so you're not too bad. This is 1 minute and 10 seconds this thing started, so we're rocking and rolling here. Your notifications are good. There you go. I love it. Also, Ellie, what's shaking over there? And hopefully people enjoyed the interview that I posted today with the guy, Justin Nault. He's a little bit of a Renaissance man. A couple people didn't like him in the comments, but other people found him very helpful. I think he's an interesting guy. Woo! Oh, very good. I love it when the notifications are up to date here. I love that. But again, today, the title of this video is BPD, the inverse of NPD. And spoiler alert, I don't agree with that. A younger version of myself might have agreed with that more. But this version of me, not as much. And the best part about this is, the reason why I disagree with it more is the genetic component of borderline. As Dr. Salerno and I have discussed many times, it's not just narcissism that has a large genetic component. Borderline does too. And what makes this super interesting is Christian is going to be joining Dr. Salerno and I next week. So this is going to be a pretty cool prelude here to that whole thing. Doing hit compress for my sinus. I'm doing good. I've had a weird energy today for some reason. I don't know if it's me or something in the universe or what, but I've had kind of a weird day. Jewel, how are you? And I do think that's possible. I think there's some borderlines that can be pretty bad, right? I think a borderline operating system is a little bit different than a narcissistic operating system, but I do think there's overlap. So Christian John, for example, he'll say it's asinine that there can be comorbid because they're so different. I know what he's saying when he says that. I just don't necessarily completely agree. I've met some borderlines out there that are pretty out of control. Now, a lot of people that are borderline, they have a more charitable view of borderline. They don't like talking about the negatives of borderline, but there are certainly some. They're not all like the sweet and innocent, just traumatized person that's a victim of circumstance. To me, it's a little too charitable of a view. Now, occasionally they can come off like that, don't get me wrong. The ones that are a waif, for example, Christine Ann Lawson has the 4 types of borderline mothers. And yes, there are borderline men too. But there's the waif, the queen, the hermit, and the witch. And it's pretty fascinating how she breaks it down. And I bet you, wow, this sounds a lot like narcissism. But here's the thing. They can be similar. I think, like, for example, narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, there's no blood test for them, right? They're just based on behavioral traits. People observe them and they'll say, all right, based on your behaviors, your narcissistic personality disorder. Based on your behaviors, your borderline personality disorder. Now, yes, there are brain scans that can show less gray matter in the areas of the brain responsible for empathy, but you're not going to get a diagnosis from that. My point in saying this is this. It's not like there's a cut and dry way of this period is a borderline personality disorder operating system. This here is a narcissistic personality disorder operating system. It's not really how it works. I think there's many combinations of things that can contribute to it. And I do think hormones can contribute to it too, whether it's male hormones or female hormones. It can definitely influence behavior, no doubt. It doesn't mean that borderline's a gendered personality disorder. That is not what it means. That's what people used to think. People used to think narcissism is the male disorder, borderline the female disorder, but that's not true. There are women who are more narcissistic, just like there are men that are more borderline. Just something to think about. How common is BPD in men who so-called Moria abused and stepdads who are always pieces of crap? What does that mean? Moria. I don't understand what that is. I mean, I think it's closer to even than they used to think, but there's still probably slightly more women that are borderline than men. Just like with narcissism, it's closer to even than they thought, but there might be a little more male narcissist than female, but it's still pretty close, I would say. But the operating systems are different. And to thrive, we're going to go over the videos today. The first one we'll go over is the Christian John one. All right. We got a good amount of people here, so let's get the party started. And I guess since there's no picture here, I can do a big one. Where's the volume for this? That's the problem. Oh, there it is.
Personality disorder is the inverse of narcissistic personality disorder. I think it means you were raised by a narcissist. It means there's the...
Let's start this from the top.
I think borderline personality disorder is the inverse of narcissistic personality disorder. I think it means you were raised by a narcissist. It means there's this sweetheart in here that has had to guard themselves every minute of their existence. And that.
So borderline means that you were raised by a narcissist. Often that can be the case, but I don't think that's the reason why borderline comes about. I think just like narcissism, there's a large genetic component. Trauma can make it worse, but it's not just created from having a narcissistic parent. What is created by having a narcissistic parent or a borderline parent? C-PTSD. That's one that is definitely created by your environment, because by definition, that's what it is. C-PTSD is from the environment. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And part of the symptoms of C-PTSD would be things like narcissistic fleas. That's when you start picking up the behaviors of the people that are narcissistic around you. And just like I invented psychopathic fleas, if you go to jail, you're around enough psychopaths, you might pick up some of those tendencies as well. But is borderline only because of a narcissistic parent? No, not only. Is it always a sweetheart inside of them? Well, a charitable view, I'll say. Some can be more sweethearts than others. Some of them can be downright nasty.
That's what it is. So it's not curable. It doesn't need to be cured. It is a sign that a person has been abused and that they need love.
Oh, another charitable poor Christian. He might get mad at me if he watches this. But it's a sign that they need love. Here's the thing about that. If you're with a borderline in a relationship, that might be how the borderline wants to frame it sometimes. But Dr. Salerno and I did an interview titled, You Can't Love the Borderline Out of It. Your love is not enough to change the borderline. And that's essential for people to know. Just because you love them doesn't mean they're going to change. They have to work on themselves. They have to try to go to DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, or CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and they have to work on their issues. Now, they need love just like any human needs love. I don't think that necessarily is exclusive to borderline.
And beneath all of these observed things is somebody that loves people. It's the exact opposite of a narcissist who love bombs. BPD hate bombs because they're.
So BPD hate bombs because they're guarding themselves. This kind of reminds me of the old school way people used to see narcissism. Oh, they're just covering up for their insecurities. Their grandiosity is a defense mechanism. Kind of. I mean, borderlines will idealize other people and they'll have a favorite person, especially in romantic relationships. So when they idealize, it can seem pretty similar to love bombing, but it's a little bit different. So, for example, the narcissist they're all about control, and they're going to do the cycle of abuse: love bombing, devaluing, discard, hoover. Borderlines, the cycle is a little bit different. They will idealize, and then as long as that's going well, they can idealize for a time. But usually, what ends up happening is their fear of abandonment will kick up. And sometimes the fear of abandonment is, well, I don't want this person to leave me, so I'm going to leave them first. And so maybe they get out of there before that can happen. Other times, their partner messes up one thing and the borderline splits. And since they lack object constancy, they can't see the positives of that person anymore. They go straight to all black. So before they idealize them, and then all of a sudden they can't see the positives, they can only see the negatives, and then they split. And then they might run off and they might cheat or something along those lines, go on a bender. That can happen too. Also, this is where the more love thing does come into play for a borderline. Borderlines will triangulate for a different reason than narcissists. Borderlines will triangulate to get more love because they do want love a lot of times, right? They want that. They want one person's love, but often they'll go about it in an immature way. So, for example, one borderline in my life, what she would do is she would purposefully show me her phone as Tinder messages were popping up on her phone. And she was doing this because we weren't in a committed relationship at the time, but she wanted to be in a committed relationship with me. So she was trying to provoke me to get jealous, to say, all right, no, you shouldn't be on Tinder. I'm going to commit to you. But to me, that was more of a red flag than it was, wow, like I really want to commit to you now. Here you are trying to triangulate me with your Tinder matches. Now, like not a good start for a relationship. So that's the difference I see. Narcissists will often triangulate because they like seeing you squirm. They like making you uncomfortable. It makes them feel powerful and superior. And they also know you might be more hungry for them too at that point. Another thing that makes them feel more powerful and superior. So it's a little more sinister when a narcissist does it. It can be understandable when a borderline does it. The reason is understandable, but it doesn't make it okay. It's still an immature thing to do.
Guarding themselves because the people that were supposed to love them didn't. And every moment of the first 18 years of their lives was full of confusion, abuse, neglect, gaslighting, and everything that comes along with narcissistic abuse. That was their parents. The result is BPD.
Well, about that. About that. Often, we'll say. To thrive. Thank you. Let's see what you have to say here. Yes, C-PTSD being perceived as BPD. Yeah, they can look similar. Without a doubt, they can, right? But as Dr. Salerno and I have went over, and Dr. Simon and I have went over, they're different things. They're different diagnoses, and they shouldn't be combined for a reason because they're different things. Is Christian actually explain? That sounds more like what he's explaining, honestly. He has the old school view of borderline. And granted, he said he would update his thinking on that. He wouldn't word it the same way. When he talked to me about it initially, he didn't tell me exactly what he said. Because if I knew exactly what he said, we might have been able to have some of this discussion. But he didn't, and so we don't know. But to me, that is absolutely correct to thrive. I think he's more explaining C-PTSD, like someone who's had a narcissistic parent, they've been abused, they've experienced narcissistic abuse, and there's been a lot of that throughout their entire lives, and then C-PTSD is the result. Borderline, and this is something we'll go over with Dr. Salerno, we'll go over the differences again between C-PTSD and borderline and why they're different things. What a lot of people don't like to admit about borderline is there's some of those toxic tendencies in borderline. The borderlines can be abusive too. It doesn't mean they're all abusive, and it doesn't mean they can't also be abused. Borderlines are very often abused by narcissists. Absolutely. It's a notorious couple. The male narcissist with a female borderline. Happens all the time. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's male borderlines with female narcissists as well. But I mean, it sounds good though, right? If you're a borderline listening to what Christian said there, you'd think, well, that makes me feel better about myself, right? It makes them feel seen and validated, even if it's not 100% accurate. And there's a point where sometimes in the beginning, people that need a change, it's good for them to hear some positive things about themselves. Even if it isn't completely true, I think it can still help in a way, right? As long as they fully are able to take responsibility. The problem with something like that would be if they kind of run with that narrative and they just use it as an excuse to be more of a victim and to not change, well, then that would be a problem. That would be a problem. Jules says, energized, my ex could drown in emotions for himself and starve emotions for all else. That sounds exactly right. Exactly right. Phil Bradley. Hola. I recorded this on December the 11th. Awake now. What's shaken? What's not true? Parents are blamed for everything. Yes, they are. They are. But it's not always true, though, right? And we've been seeing this right now a lot with the Oprah thing about no contact. And yes, there's absolutely a lot of parents that did deserve to be cut off. That's true. That's true. But what people aren't mentioning is this, that there are some adult children who are maybe narcissists or borderline. They're trying to punish their parents. Nobody wants to talk about that. I'm not saying it's a majority of the cases in any way, but I am saying it happens. It happens. It's not a 0% of the time that's the case. And why is that the case? It's the case because all adult narcissists have parents and were once kids. So when people say that, oh, no parents getting cut off for no reason, it's like, well, sometimes it can really just be a silent treatment. And maybe the parent had a boundary or was assertive or called their kids out for something. And the kid's a narcissist. So what happens when a kid's called out? They get furious and they lash out, or maybe they don't get their way. And I've heard a lot of adult narcissistic kids, they withhold the grandkids from their parents. That's their way to punish them. Now, are those people always narcissists? No. Sometimes it's just going no contact, of course, right? But sometimes it is an adult narcissistic parent that is doing that to punish. That does happen. But people don't like talking about this because it requires a little bit of nuance. And it's so hard to talk about this. Each situation is a little bit different. So when I hear someone's situation, I might say, oh, well, this is a cut and dry case of, yeah, your parents are toxic. Absolutely go no contact. That's it. But other times it might be something different. Thanks for joining there, Jewel. I appreciate that. Harriet, welcome. What didn't you think of? Leave my parents in God's hands. Let go and let God is what they say, right, Jewel? Yes, sometimes the kid is the narcissist. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the majority. I'm just saying it can be. And I've heard it. I mean, people have reached out to me for consultations, and I've heard some pretty bad stuff. And where their kids are just out of control and they want to be able to do whatever they want. And then just like a narcissist of any age, they act out and they lash out and do whatever. That's what's missing in all this talk about no contact and narcissistic parents. No one's accounting for the fact that there can be toxic kids in the dynamic. That's a thing. All of these toxic parents they're talking about were once toxic kids, for crying out loud. They don't meet this magic threshold where it's like, all right, you were a completely innocent kid, and now you meet the magic threshold when you're an adult or you turn into a parent, and now you can meet a toxic person. No, that's not how it works. You were toxic the entire time. And then you're a parent and you're probably even more toxic. Like, that's how it works. I believe parents are a big part just about the variables in an outside support system. Oh, don't get me wrong. I mean, parents are absolutely important and they impact their kids. Absolutely. My sister was diagnosed BPD. Right on. Thank you, Ellie. Which part resonated with you, Ellie? My sister was diagnosed BPD, and I'm sure our dad was the cause. I'll say it couldn't help. It doesn't help to have a narcissistic parent, or put it like that. Is it the cause? Stay tuned for Christian, John, and I, and Dr. Salerno. I'll probably be uploading that one, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. Awake Now says, I never had big problems with my daughter. We were very close, and now at 43, she is toxic after having certain life experiences outside the home. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. And it's just something that doesn't get brought up into the discussion. Everyone wants to give the kids the pass on it. And don't get me wrong, I know why they do. They want to give the kids a pass because a lot of those kids have been invalidated and abused their entire lives. And then what happens is, finally, they've had enough. They've tried to understand their parents. They've tried to be the bigger person. They've tried all these things. But guess what? Nothing worked. And when nothing works, they said, all right, I'm going to go no contact now. It was like that dude, right? Remember that dude I went over in the Oprah show? Him and his wife, the mother-in-law, the narcissistic mother, tried to interfere with the baby shower, wanted to delay the wedding, didn't want their son to marry that woman. Yeah, that dude did the right thing because his mother sounded out of control. She was a narcissistic mother, and she was trying to control her son's life, and so that dude did the right thing. Now, for a contrast, remember that girl in the green? The girl in the green that was famous on TikTok, she was the opposite. She sounded more like the toxic parent that just didn't get her way. She was trying to minimize her kids' concerns. That was such a small thing, minimizing. And she just couldn't quite get it, what was going on. Yes, to thrive. It's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to that. And before that, though, I've been thinking about trying to get Marcella back on the show. She's difficult to pin down, though. She's more difficult than anyone to pin down, honestly. And I've had her on twice, but there's always something with her. My father went to prison because of abuse to me. Ooh, that's no good. Well, good thing he's out. I hope he's out of your life. Jared, more and more we can see the toxic development from childhood to adulthood. Some children are mean and dangerous. Absolutely, Ellie. You're very correct. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Awake Now. Hey there, Olivia. And because of his manipulative nature, she was always very stubborn, though. Yeah, I mean, that's where the personality, temperament, that's from birth a lot of times, right? But let's go over the Dr. Ramani one, 2, Thrive. Let's see what she has to say for herself. There we are.
So let's say you're crying.
Oh. Look at this. Got Andrew Tate down there.
So let's say you're crying in front of the narcissistic person, sharing your sadness because you found out that they had betrayed you, they'd had an affair, or they'd have an inappropriate relationship. They did what they wanted to do because it felt good at the time to get their supply and validation, but now it's got them in a bit of hot water. So somebody crying at a time like that, they don't get power from that. They feel shame because they're the reason that person is crying.
And so she's saying that narcissist gets caught cheating, and then they see someone cry, and then they might cry because they feel shame about what they did. That's a pretty charitable explanation, if you ask me. I think that might be more of a manipulation tactic to try to avoid accountability at that point and make the other person feel bad and think, oh, and make them think, oh, the narcissist feels so bad about what they did, so I'm going to forgive them. They're really trying. They're doing whatever. But I don't know if that's always what's going on there. Is it possible there's sometimes shame? Yeah, it's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. But a lot of times, I think that's a little bit of a charitable explanation. And if you see it that way, you might get yourself in a little bit of trouble. I think you're better off when it comes to narcissists, seeing them more as shameless. That's what I recommend. Because remember this, if they truly felt all of that shame, if they truly felt all of that guilt, would they still be doing what they do? Wouldn't that guilt and shame be the very thing that prompts them to try to do better if it's truly there? And since you don't usually see that with them, right? In fact, rarely do you see that with them, right? So the fact that you're not seeing it makes me wonder, is that really shame? If that's what's going on? I would tend to think not. And I think their actions will communicate loud and clear what their feelings and what their priorities are. And what their priorities are is narcissistic supply at all costs. And if they cheat to get it, that's how they get it. Now, they might do anything to try to worm their way out of that. They might try to blame you for what they did. They might try to be a cry bully, and that's a good example of what's going on here too. Cry bully is someone that plays the victim in a situation they created. And yeah, if you get caught cheating and then you cry, what is that? You're playing the victim in the situation you created. It reminds me of that one meme that says Ariana Grande makes music for women that get caught cheating and then cry about it.
And they know that. But instead of saying, I am so sorry, and taking ownership and taking responsibility, more shame, they don't do that. They get angry at the person for showing the emotion because they're angry at the thing that brought up this bad feeling. You made me feel bad by feeling bad about the bad thing I did. I know that sounds like a big circle, but that's what they're upset about. So that emotion they don't like. They like.
And so when she says feel bad, I don't want you to think of that as shame. I want you to think of that as just hypersensitivity to criticism. That's more like what it is. They don't like it when all of a sudden the positive flow of admiration is cut off. And now they don't want this accountability and they get this negative jolt. But that negative jolt to me, it's different than just shame. The hypersensitivity to criticism and perceived criticism to me is different. And what's the example I use? Well, when a narcissist is out and about cheating, on benders, gambling, doing whatever they do, are they racked with guilt and shame as they do those things? I don't think so. The only time they even feel it is when they're called out. So is that truly guilt? Or is that truly shame? Or is it really just not liking being called out and more hypersensitivity to criticism? I know which one I think it is.
The emotion when they bring up something and you're, I can't believe it, and they're calm. Because a calm person always looks like the one in control. And they're saying, like, I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. Then they're in the driver's seat. That's the kind of emotion they do like. So,
and that part's true. The second part there is true, I think. So basically, if a narcissist baits and provokes someone, and then the other person has an emotional reaction, absolutely. Dr. Ramani is absolutely correct about that. They'll play that calm card and they'll say something like, oh, And especially if other people are around, they'll say, oh, they're unwell, or they're sick, or they have issues, and they seem very calm and cool and collect. And it's really just kind of sticking the knife in more, because here they are. They've done something atrocious and they've really gotten under someone else's skin. And then they have their calm, patronizing tone there, like, ooh, like no good. And so I seen Candace Owens doing this to Tim Pool. That's something to go over too, in fact. Now, granted, I can separate all of the politics from that, by the way. Some people can't, because, I mean, granted, there's some things Candace says that I would probably agree with, but I do see some narcissistic tactics in there too. Let's see here. If you ever watched the documentary about Elvis, a lot of Kenpo guys are like that, just this image of being good. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, Jewel, I would say that's what they're trying to do. Get out of being caught. And what's shaken? I really found this term 30 years ago, though I'm surprised it's lightly thrown around. I appreciate and respect you sharing this. Ah, you're very welcome. Feel like my life is now avoiding narcissists however I can. Before you know it, it'll be second nature for you to avoid narcissists by practicing radical self-respect. And to thrive, thank you again for this. Let's see what they say. Can their hypersensitivity to criticism be a defense mechanism against feeling shame, as to not feel how they felt as a child? It's possible. It's possible. I'm not going to say it's never true. Like I said, considering I think that narcissism is a spectrum, I think like some of the more severe ones, probably not as much shame. Less severe, they might feel some more shame. And it's possible. Like the hypersensitivity criticism is when they'll get angry and they'll lash out at the person. The anger, you could say it's a bit of a defense sometimes. You could. I'm not going to say you can't. Let's see here. Jewel says, shame, it's like a hot potato project. Yeah, Mr. Dr. Salerno has said. And thank you for gifting the membership there, Jewel. I appreciate that too. Of course, Olivia. That's what radical self-respect is all about. Yeah, I think I did. I saw there was 3 of them, right? I'll go back to make sure. Yeah, C-PTSD being perceived as BPD. That is more of what I thought Christian's video was. And it did, to me, it does sound like he's explaining more C-PTSD than borderline. Now, that being said, a borderline can also have C-PTSD to make this even trickier, right? And even narcissists can also have C-PTSD, because think about it. Considering the genetic component of narcissism, there's a narcissistic parent, there's a percentage chance their child is also a narcissist. And in that case, even when they're younger, even if they have impaired empathy, they still could possibly develop C-PTSD. And that's an interesting case study too, actually, to think, is a narcissist less likely to develop C-PTSD because of their brain functioning, because of the impaired empathy? That's a good question for Dr. Salerno, actually. I don't know if I know the answer to that question. But I do know they can develop it. They certainly can develop it, that's for sure. Well, you know what I would say, Olivia? It starts with trusting your gut. When you trust your gut, and that takes practice to learn how to trust your gut. You're not going to do that instantly, especially if you've been gaslit by a narcissist and you're subscribed to their distorted version of reality. Yeah, it's not going to happen right away. But once you leave and you unsubscribe from their distorted version of reality, then you can learn to trust yourself again. And then when you notice something's not quite right, you learn to not ignore that. And you learn to follow through on those gut feelings. And what might happen first is you feel the gut feelings, but then you don't act on them. You don't act on them. And then maybe your gut feeling is proven correct later. And then you say, oh, okay, I should have trusted that gut feeling of mine. So next time I have that gut feeling, I'm going to listen to that gut feeling. That's an acceptable thing, Kat. But to thrive, hopefully I answered all of your questions there. What were you singing there, Kat? Now, it's up to you all now what you would like me to do. Do you want me to go over some borderline audiobook? The one from Christine Ann Lawson I always talk about? Because we can go over that. Yes, Ellie, she's like a wizard too. Neither late nor early. She arrives when she is supposed to. I like Soundgarden and Chris Cornell. Some Black Hole Sun or Fell on Black Days or Spoon Man. What else? How about some Audio Slave? Be Yourself. Yeah, see, Christy? Go Spoon Man. I know, Like a Stone. It's Like a Stone Audio Slave, though, isn't it? Or is that really Soundgarden? The Black Hole Sun's a classic. Fell on Black Days is a classic. And then Don't You Lock Up Something That You Wanted to See Fly? I used to sing more, Kat. I haven't been doing it as much. There used to be videos of me singing on YouTube, by the way. Yep, but you're like, love heals all, la la la. No. Loving ourselves can heal all. So I didn't see this one then, to thrive. Was it up there more? It was the first $5 super chat. I asked about the Christian John quote about scapegoats being receptacles of the unfelt emotions, which gets perceived as BPD, but is truly C-PTSD. Okay, so I'll answer this now. So the scapegoat is the receptacle of all the family shit, as Christian John would say, right? But just being a scapegoat, that's not enough to cause BPD. I think that used to be what they think. They used to think with the environmental component, that's all it is. And they would say, well, when you have a narcissistic parent and they don't treat their children consistently, they would say that's one of the causes of borderline personality disorder. That's what I used to believe. But now with this genetic thing going on, the DNA, the genes, I don't know, makes me think not so much anymore. It makes me think if over 50% of personality disorders are in the genes, in the DNA, how true is that? My rule of thumb would be this. C-PTSD is the only certain thing that you can get from having a narcissistic parent. The personality disorders, there has to be something else there. Now, granted, to be tricky with this, I think C-PTSD can look kind of volatile in some cases. Like maybe, for example, you run to addictions because you have C-PTSD. Well, now all of a sudden, you're adding substances and alcohol to the mix. That can look pretty volatile. And you can go on an emotional roller coaster. And sometimes addictions and alcoholism can mimic bipolar disorder. It can mimic BPD. So that's something to pay attention to as well. But hopefully I answered your question there, Tooth 5. And so basically all of the charitable interpretations you see of borderline, to me, those are usually they're talking more C-PTSD. Because sometimes there's some pretty mean girls that have called me out on TikTok. I posted a video on TikTok about the BPD women splitting Holy mackerel. And some women got very mad at me for that. And they were like, and I'm thinking to myself, is this just C-PTSD? Or are you demonstrating splitting for us all? But I was like, good job, good demonstration of splitting. Scapegoats have C-PTSD. BPD is separate. Looking forward to that podcast with Dr. Salerno and Kristen John. And I guarantee you to thrive, we will go over that. We will go over that. But that's how I would see it. And I'm pretty sure that's how Dr. Salerno sees it too. Christian, we'll have to talk to him about it. He might not agree with it. Kat says, my C-PTSD was pretty fiery with my ex. Only so many times you can handle being called worthless as a nickname. Yes, that's not a good nickname. And so the radical self-respect way in that case would be, like, once someone's calling me worthless and like it's not even close to being a joke, it's like who the hell do you think you are? Why would I stay in a situation like that? That's what I thought. BPD gets misdiagnosed for C-PTSD. Yeah, in those cases, yes. But I'm going to play also in a minute here this Christine Ann Lawson thing to show you what professionals think about borderline. This woman's an expert in the borderline. Eventually you get frustrated and hit your limit. Yes, absolutely. What's the main difference between C-PTSD and BPD? It's a very good question. I would say the biggest difference is C-PTSD is from trauma. BPD, personality disorder. Now, in terms of the behavior, I would say BPD often more volatile. They'll have the very intense relationships, and they really fantasize about their favorite person, having that one ideal love. Often there'll be, and this is where it overlaps with C-PTSD, the substance stuff. That can be both. Self-harming, that could even be both too. Someone with C-PTSD could also self-harm. That's true too. But the intensity of the relationships and more manipulative a lot of times, I would say. And granted, it's tricky because people with C-PTSD can also be manipulative. And this is the thing. With every diagnosis there is, whether it's C-PTSD, NPD, BPD, like not every character trait they have can be attributed to that thing. Like someone can also just be an asshole too. Like not everything is attributed to one thing. So a C-PTSD person, they can also be an asshole. Like someone who has C-PTSD, they're not immune from being an asshole just because they have C-PTSD. Something to remember. Hugs for her for sure. Do you think our gene traits will be used against us by certain authorities? Anything's possible. Anything's possible, I'll say. Have one or two narcissistic traits, etc. Cut them out. Yeah, so Kat, the difference is, remember, I would say BPD have the more intense relationships, an extreme fear of abandonment. They'll have a favorite person a lot of times. And also, they'll come off as more emotionally immature as well, a lot of times. I think that's another difference. So C-PTSD, you can have a normal development. But yeah, the trauma is going to impact your development too. But it's not going to impact it as much as someone that has BPD or some other personality disorder. And again, there can be people with some pretty bad childhoods though too, right? And then you got to figure out which one it is. And some people have some pretty bad childhoods. And in those cases, yeah, it's going to leave a mark. I mean, they're not going to come out of those things unscathed. Yes, someone can just be an asshole. That is a thing, right? And I mean, assholes can be anyone. An asshole can have bipolar. An asshole can be autistic. An asshole can have ADHD. An asshole can be also a narcissist. But I also challenge people, show me a narcissist that's not an asshole. Assholes can be addicts. Assholes can be depressed. Assholes can have anything you would think of. And so And what happens is when those assholes say, oh, I'm on the spectrum, I have ADHD, then people listen to them and they'll say, oh, I know someone with ADHD and they're an asshole. It's like, well, is that because they have ADHD or is it just because they're an asshole? I would say it could easily just be because they're an asshole. Now, granted, like I've talked about before, narcissists might claim to have all sorts of things, doesn't mean they do. But narcissism can be comorbid with some of these things as well. Narcissists can be comorbid with ADHD. Narcissists can be comorbid with addiction issues or bipolar. It's wild. Max says, I am an asshole. Nice to meet you, asshole. But if I am towards a nice person, I will apologize. But if it's towards another asshole, I just keep out assholing them. There you go. I read that uncorrected. ODD leads to BPD, oppositional defiance disorder. Yeah, I mean, I can have some of that in a debate bro thing. I can turn into a debate bro. And when I turn it on, I can be a jerk when I turn it on. That's true. Jolly, you've missed a couple of the streams here, but it's great to have you here. The flock of black sheep is not complete without Jolly, you know. Reminds me of that clip from the movie Spaceballs. How many assholes we got on this ship anyhow? Good old John Candy, I think, is in that, right? Who else is in Spaceballs? Ah, I see. Work is acceptable, Jolly. We all got to do what we got to do. I think Bill Cosby said that too. He was talking about cocaine in one of his skits. And he said, why do people do cocaine? And he's like, well, I heard they say it makes you more of who you are. You become your authentic self. And then Bill Cosby's like, well, what happens if you're an asshole? And the thing about that was Bill Cosby was one of those clean comics back then. He used to yell at Richard Pryor for cursing too much. And the irony of all of this now is, fast forward, look at what Bill Cosby was doing behind the scenes. And it's like, dude, you're going to rip Richard Pryor for cursing, and then you're going to do what you did? Like, Bill Cosby, come on. Like, give me a break. Uncle Buck. Speaking of Uncle Buck, it's John Candy season between planes, trains, and automobiles and Home Alone. My friend Kelly, she sent me something today about Home Alone. Let's see if I can look it up here real quick. Nope. He's dreamy as Lone Star. Oh, wow. Cat had the hots for him. Bill Paxton. Bill Paxton from your favorite Independent Day. You want me to do another one, Tooth Thrive? Can narcissists change? Dr. Ramani's insight on empathy. Yeah, we can go over that. You did. You did, huh? I actually had a crush on John Candy growing up. That's what you said. Laugh, laugh, laugh. Laugh, 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 and then you're naked, right? That's what dude said from last night, Scott Galloway. Let's see here. I'm just going to that clip, Tooth Thrive, so you know. All right. Kat says, I used to watch Dr. Ramani a lot, but find her stuff stale these days. I still appreciate her, though. Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot from Dr. Ramani back in the day. I just have a couple of disagreements with her now on a couple things. Nothing too drastic, though, you know? All right. So we're going to go over this next clip here to Thrive. Let's see.
Can a narcissist develop?
Ready for this? Before we start it, Thrive says, it's an interesting one because narcs, whether they're parents or exes or current partners saying they're in therapy, it's just a matter of time until that rubber band snaps under enough pressure, the mask slips again. Yes, I agree. That's the most likely scenario. Let's see here.
Can a narcissist develop more empathy? Well, here's what Dr. Ramani has to say.
I haven't seen any change. The heartbreak of narcissism is that you can actually train this person to be a little bit more empathic, to not be so jerky and not be so entitled and actually listen to other people. As soon as there's some stress in the system, they blow again. The rubber band goes right back. And so narcissists don't tend to retain that growth, maybe a tiny bit, but usually not enough for anyone to notice.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Being Well. I'm Forrest Hansen.
Ugh. Yeah, I agree with that. I think what would happen is the most you could ever try to teach them is cognitive empathy, as Lee Hammock would say, or that's what he tries to do in his own life. And so when you teach someone cognitive empathy, what you do is you say to them, hey, you want to put yourself in someone else's shoes and think, well, if someone did this to you, what would you think? What would you feel? And the hardest part about it would be getting them to take that step back in the moment and responding rather than reacting. And what does that take? That takes a lot of emotional self-control that a lot of them just don't want to have, because it's easier just to lash out and say the first thing that comes to your mind. So again, though, for most narcissists, they don't even want to try. Like they're not even going to try to do this, so it becomes a moot point. If they try, that's a little bit of a different story. Like, for example, it would be interesting to speak to Lee Hammock's partner and to hear what she would say if she was being honest about things. That would be an interesting case study. Yes, that was a short one. Yeah, cognitive empathy, correct. If you've been hurt by a narc, then gaining cognitive empathy is still not safe enough. I wouldn't trust it, right? If you have a bad experience with one, I wouldn't trust their cognitive empathy to kick in. Not at all. Hello there. Size 629. The narc I knew went to therapy for 7 years. He would say very bluntly, I was wrong. You have every right to leave. You didn't deserve to be done that way. Like it was a rehearsed line. To be fair, that's a good rehearsed line, because that is something that someone would say with like humility, because like any kind of sorry, the best sorries and apologies are changed behavior, right? But also it's being okay whether the other person accepts your apology or not. Because a true, humble apology, you'll be okay with whatever else that person says. Even if they don't forgive you right away, you'll say, okay, just like he said, you have the right to still be mad. I understand that. To me, that is how you would show you are truly sorry. You are trying to show a true amends here. But most narcissists aren't going to do that. Right? They're going to be mad. If you don't accept the apology, if they try, they'll be mad. And that's how you know it's not quite right. I've had a bad experience with about 4 of them, narcissists. Thrive says, I think all narcs will give you intermittent good behavior to keep you trapped in the cycle. Correct. And you can't confuse some good days for a good relationship. That tricks up a lot of people, but it's not the same. Every narcissist has their charming days for the very most part. They can be charming, charismatic, fun, especially if you haven't seen them for a while. They come back around, they'll be that charming, charismatic person, but it's just a matter of time before that dick comes out again and they start acting like an asshole again. And you can't have one without the other. Some people want to pick and choose like it's a la carte, like an a la carte menu. Oh, I want this charismatic and fun piece, but I don't want this devaluing. I don't want this insults and put downs. I don't want this gaslighting. But you think you can't separate them. There is no a la carte with a narcissist. You get the full buffet every time. There's no exceptions to that. Yes, that's another good one, Cap. Narcissists and even borderlines, they can try to trap you too with a pregnancy or getting someone pregnant. Because think about it, if you're a borderline, what's a good way to not get abandoned? Oh, well, you have a kid with this person. Now you're less likely to be abandoned. Not impossible, of course. Guys run away still. But say if you're a male borderline and you have a fear of abandonment, what would you do? Oh, now you get a woman pregnant. Well, now you're much less likely to get abandoned, right? Because now, if she has the kid, you're attached. You're with her for 18 years minimum. Correct, Christy. Actions speak loudest of all. And they'll try and tap you with marriage and a baby? Yes. They'll still treat you badly or worse if you have a child with them? Correct. I made a video once about when you're pregnant. Narcissists often mistreat their pregnant partners because, one, they don't like the attention the woman's getting. It takes attention from them. And then they might also use it as an excuse to control you more. And they'll say things like, well, we got to make sure things are this way for the baby. And they'll act like they're going to be father of the year, but it's really just a covert way to control more of you. That happens too. And then also, they might also pull the rug the second the baby's born. All that talk goes out the window, and then poof, they might literally go, or they might emotionally check out because it's no longer fun. Like they can be into something when it seems fun, when it seems exciting, but then the actual work comes in and they don't like that. They don't want that. They don't want the sleepless nights. They don't want the actual nitty gritty of it all. Or is this all your fault? You're having this baby alone. I've seen that happen, Jewel. That absolutely happens. Amen. So do you all want me to start this Understanding the Borderline Mother audiobook? We're not going to go the whole thing. It's hours and hours, but maybe we can do like the introduction to see what you guys think of it. Let's see. You want me to do it, Jewel? We can do it. Oh, it's a stupid thing.
Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books presented by Christine Ann Lawson. Preface. Voice. The thought. In fact, we forget how much we know about her despite having powerful reactions to a certain gesture, a tone of voice, or a facial expression in someone else, that person, of course, often being our spouse. Understanding our mother.
Now, also to note, Christine Ann Lawson has more of an environmental view, not as much genetics, so keep that in mind too. But even knowing that, the way she speaks about the behaviors that they do, you might get blown away by it.
Is the first step to understanding ourselves. This book is about mothers who suffer from borderline personality disorder, BPD. BPD is defined as a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image, and affects, and marked impulsivity. The term borderline.
And to pause this, see, this thing's available on YouTube, all of it. I don't know if that would give me a copyright strike, honestly. It might, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure the rules when the entire thing is uploaded to YouTube, if it falls under fair use or not. I'm not sure. I am not sure, Mac. Toxic is not when they're bad to you. Toxic is when they're bad to you on some days and good on others. Yeah, okay. I was watching a live yesterday and they played a movie clip. Yes, a movie clip, absolutely. They're not allowed. No movie clips. It's when they're so inconsistent with their love that you spend most of your time wondering if you should stay or leave. Answer, always leave. Correct. It's like my friend Adriana Bucci says, if you're confused, it means you're being abused. It's a good thing to remember. So let's see here.
Means that their emotional psychosis and neurosis, particularly when faced with abandonment or rejection. Thus, children with borderline mothers grow up in a contradictory and confusing emotional world. This book is also about children with borderline mothers. Developmental psychologists now know that before the age of 3, children are incapable of understanding deception because they are unable to discern the difference between what they believe and what their mother believes. They also do not understand incongruence, that mother might feel one emotion while expressing another, or that hostility can be masked by a smile. And yet their survival depends on the ability to understand this individual who controls their universe. Adult children of borderline...
So yes, fair use 107 copyright, fair use. I have to say it aloud.
Mothers enter therapy. They feel fragmented, depressed, and confused because understanding their mothers seems impossible. They bring the therapist parts of a complex puzzle, twisting and turning pieces of themselves and their mothers to see what fits, unable to connect or separate parts that once formed a whole. Without intervention, the intense, unpredictable, and volatile relationship between the borderline mother and her child can have devastating consequences. Children of borderlines are not only at risk for developing BPD, but in some cases, the lives of both mother and child can be endangered. The stories from children raised by mothers with borderline personality disorder should awaken the consciousness of all. During therapy, some young children depicted their view of their mothers in drawings. Adult children shared journals, photographs, and tape recordings. Regardless of their age, these children longed to be heard and to be believed.
They longed for freedom, for validation, and for escape from the emotional labyrinth of the relationship with their mothers.
Some children of borderlines experience childhood as an emotional prison camp, ruled by arbitrarily hostile guards. Their feelings are captured by the words of adult survivors of concentration camps.
We were terribly afraid that people would never notice a thing.
And think about this. Think of how she's describing this, and then refer back to Christian John's description of borderline, and you think, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect here, huh? But the way she describes it, Christine Ann Lawson, she's got a good way with words. She almost like turns it into, which I think is pretty cool.
Nobody in the world would notice a thing. Us, the struggle, the dead. That this wall was so huge that nothing, no message about us, would ever make it out.
Although the emotional world of the borderline's child can be a dark and forsaken land, the purity of heart, the resilience of spirit, and the open-mindedness of children illuminate the darkness. A borderline mother who sees herself through her child's eyes can find the life-saving motivation to seek treatment. Unrestrained love, can be found in the gleam in her child's eyes. Without treatment, these mothers are at risk for passing the disorder to the next generation and for missing the love they so desperately seek. Learning to recognize the symptoms of borderline personality disorder is the first step in helping these mothers and their children. We must listen to their stories, learn from their pain, and share the responsibility for abandoning these mothers and children. As a famous survivor of Auschwitz, Primo Levi reminds us, maybe each of us is Cain to some Abel and slay him in the field without knowing it. Introduction. Borderline personality disorder, BPD, is the single most common personality disorder affecting approximately 6 million Americans. Individuals with BPD are volatile, impulsive, self-destructive, and fearful of abandonment. Clinically,
Two Thrive says, Jared, would you say the BPD enabler mother and NPD father is more likely than reverse? Yes. Such as covert narc mother and BPD father. Like I said, both are possible, but you'll probably see more NPD fathers with BPD mothers. If you had to break it down by percentage, maybe like 20% male borderlines with a female narcissist. And that's just an educated guess.
the term describes their behavior as bordering between sanity and insanity because separation and loss can trigger suicidal and psychotic reactions. Although males can develop BPD, women outnumber men 2 to 1 within clinical populations. Males with BPD may be diagnosed as antisocial due to aggressive and violent behavior, and consequently are more likely to enter the justice system rather than the mental health system. Children with borderline mothers begin their lives with an insecure attachment to an emotionally unstable mother. Thus, these children risk becoming impulsive, rage-filled, oppositional, aggressive, depressed, and violent. They are also at risk for developing BPD themselves. Borderline personality disorder can be passed from one generation to the next.
And I would say it's passed because of the genetic component, more so than the environmental component. And so they don't have those inherent genetic traits. Yeah, a borderline mother can give their children C-PTSD, but I think that's what would be passed if they don't have that genetic component. And, no one talks about this, but there could be such a thing as borderline fleas. If there's narcissistic fleas, why can't there be borderline fleas? I don't see a reason why there couldn't.
Making early recognition and intervention essential. Identifying BPD can be difficult because the disorder includes individuals with different symptom clusters. Therapists often fail to recognize BPD when stereotypical characteristics such as depression or suicidal feelings are not present. Prior to 1980, many borderline mothers were misdiagnosed as manic depressive or schizophrenic.
That happened a lot. And people that have borderline, they get confused for bipolar all of the time because it seems so similar. But one of the biggest differences is if someone with borderline goes on a mood stabilizer, it still won't help their personality disorder. A bipolar person, if that's all they have, they'll probably be greatly helped by a mood stabilizer or making drastic changes to their lifestyle. Absolutely. But that was one of the clues that people experience. Oh, I did medicine, I did this, but it didn't change. I still wasn't better. And then people get relief a lot of times when they get diagnosed with it because oh, I see. It makes it make sense. And I think a lot of people that have undiagnosed autism, it can appear similar to this as well. So just like C-PTSD can appear similar, so can undiagnosed autism too, I think.
Children with borderline mothers often describe their mothers as ridiculous, unbelievable, outrageous, absurd, or foolish. Indeed, young children see these mothers as make-believe mothers who may fit one of 4 basic profiles: the waif mother, the hermit mother, the queen mother, and the witch mother. Some adult children of borderlines literally describe their mothers in these terms. For generations, Folk tales have helped children categorize and understand various kinds of people. Fairy tales and folk tales capture a child's view of the grown-up world, one that adults often fail to see. Understanding the Borderline Mother explores 4 profiles of BPD as perceived through the eyes of the borderline mother's child. In most cases, the child was female. Females have greater difficulty separating their identity from their mothers, primarily because mother and daughter share the same gender. Therefore, most of the case examples discussed are mothers and daughters. Although borderline mothers obviously raise sons as well as daughters, males are less likely to enter therapy. If male children of borderline mothers develop BPD, they are more likely to be identified among prison populations. A male child who does not develop BPD is most likely the all-good child. The all-good male child tends to display narcissistic traits and, as an adult, may marry a borderline woman, recreating his role of rescuer. Such men are often successful professionals who are highly defended against recognizing their mother's disorder. Understanding the borderline mother brings listeners into the emotional world of the borderline's child, where they may find themselves thinking, I don't want to know this. For some listeners, the content may be profoundly disturbing. Those who grew up with a borderline mother may need time and distance in order to fully digest the contents of this book. One does not eagerly look back on a dark and painful past. The willingness to look, however, allows us to see the present more clearly and to create a brighter future for our own children.
Think. All right, so that's doing good, Danielle. How are you? We're just watching some of this Understanding the Borderline Mother audiobook. That was the introduction. If you want, I can play one more. I can play, there's a bunch of this to go, but we can play another one if you all want to be, if you want to hear it. Cause I find this stuff fascinating because you don't hear these kinds of honest takes about borderline. And like I said, I don't agree with just the environmental component, but outside of that, I do agree with the behaviors. So when you listen to her talk about the behaviors, compare and contrast that to C-PTSD, and you'll say, yeah, people with C-PTSD, they're not going to do this. They're not going to do these things. The willingness to look is very important, isn't it, 2-5? Well, I'm glad you came on here, Danielle. But let me know. Do you want me to play another section of it? The sections are only like 10 minutes.
Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Understanding the Borderline Mother, Helping Her Children Transcend. 1. Make-Believe Mothers. When I used to read fairy tales, I fancied that kind of thing never happened, and now here I am in the middle of one. Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
And so she does all of these things where she intertwines fairy tales and books. It's actually pretty cool. Let me answer the questions here before we go on. I believe generational trauma causes genetic issues. I mean, that's the epigenetic view, right? And there's a lot of people who think that. Dr. Salerno thinks it's a little bit overblown, but I'm not exactly sure what I think about it, honestly. I've been listening. It's cool. Thank you. Finally just chimed in. Yeah, so we'll play some more. This section is actually longer than I thought. We won't probably go through the whole thing. Having a borderline mother would be the worst. Yes. Yes, it would. Who was a creepy perv? Oh, yes. Yeah, I've heard about that. Alice in Wonderland, eh? One of my favorite quotes from Alice in Wonderland is, if you don't know where you're going, there is no wrong way. And what does he say? What else did I say in Alice in Wonderland? Oh, one from the book that's not in the movie is, in this kingdom, you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. You have to kind of look at people's family and they're all the same. Yeah. And I mean, and when you see that, like, how do you distinguish which one it is? Is it genetic, or is it the environmental, or is it simply a combination of both? And honestly, combination of both, I think, is also true. Ethereal, welcome. From my observation, they have a lack of emotional intelligence, but they seem to have natural motherly instincts, which they eventually use to guilt trip their children to live for them. That does happen. Yes, it does. That's where the parentification / enmeshment comes in. Because to a borderline mother, like, they really like the infants. They'll love bomb the infants and the toddlers. But as the kid grows up, especially if it's a son, a lot of times, that can trigger a fear of abandonment because they don't want to lose their son. They want their son to meet their needs, not the other way around. Similar to a narcissistic parent, honestly. And so that's what can happen. If you know who Dr. Amen, he talks about this. No, I don't know if I know him. Don't know if I know him. Who's Dr. Amen? Maybe I'll invite him on the show.
It's like drowning. There's a darkness within her that can suck you in and swallow you whole, yet it's unfathomable because she's your mother. Laura's voice sounded flat and far away. She spoke in a child's voice, as if trapped at the bottom of a well. There's no way out. She drew into herself and left me with her fear. I wasn't sure if I could reach her in time. Laura's mother was no ordinary mother. Submerged in the cold darkness of despair.
It's a good question, though, Olivia. What is the real purpose of this channel and chat here? Well, to practice radical self-respect, and I started talking about narcissism because it was a way, like, I used to just talk about radical self-respect and dating, but people weren't interested in that until you give them the pain point. And I'm someone that's been through all of this. I've been through narcissistic abuse in the family and in romantic relationships, and I learned people need to figure out why they would even need radical self-respect. And so talking about the toxic behaviors here is a way to do that and to lead them in the direction of radical self-respect. As far as the chat, I consider the chat like a flock of black sheep and me as the shepherd of black sheep. And it's a place for people to talk with one another. People that have been here for a while, they know each other now, and they'll ask about things and like get to know one another. And it's just a good space. It's a community of people to talk to about things. I mean, ask me questions. They can send super chats like Tooth5 did too. But community and radical self-respect and education. That's what this channel is about. Dr. Amen is famous in LA for diagnosing autism by brain scans. Interesting. That is interesting. What do they see in the brain scans? Is there impairment in empathy in the brain scans? But I did grow up in a Mormon household in Utah, and I see how much we were influenced by that religion. Yeah, that makes sense. My tech savvy isn't very. I would send you a clip of who he is. Well, I can look him up. Yeah, I mean, I do have some of that in the description. You're correct, Mac. But I could probably update the description. Dr. Eamon does the brain scans where you can see the damage in your brain from the specs. Yeah, I'll be very curious about that. Now, questions are welcome, Olivia. Questions are welcome. It's nice for me to talk with other NPD survivors who understand and get it. That is also one of the biggest benefits, right? When people know and understand what you're dealing with, you're not going to get that invalidation, it takes two to tango, or why didn't you leave earlier, or it's your family, blood's thicker than water, all that nonsense. Like, you're not going to get that here. Like, people understand here. Yeah, he does sound fascinating. I think I'll look him up and see if maybe I can get him on the show. And it's also, let's face it, it's interesting and entertaining as well to go over some of these conditions, right? People learn about narcissism and borderline for fun a lot of times, even after like they've learned it for themselves, they know what they've dealt with, etc. But people will come back around to stay fresh on the topic, and then people get interested by it too. Then sometimes people, if they learn about this young enough, it prompts them to go into the mental health field, and they want to become a clinical psychologist. They want to become an LCSW or a licensed professional counselor. And I've seen that happen a lot too. Cat, he did say that, didn't he? We like to watch Oprah interrupt guests and play doctor as well. That is one thing she absolutely does. She's the queen of over talking. But notice she did not overtalk Scott Galloway the other night. Did you see that? She did not overtalk him. But in the no contact one, she overtalked them all. That's not what I said, but he can diagnose anything in the brain scan. It's a brain spec. Not what you said about what? People asked me after I left my son's father and was overwhelmed why I didn't reach out to my family. I was like, why would I even do that? Yeah, I mean, friends are the family you pick for yourself because you don't always get along with family. That's for sure. You are like that cat. That jacket was doing you in. That maroon jacket. It was almost like Michael J. Fox's jacket from Back to the Future. It's like, what is that, a life vest? And like Biff would say, make like a tree and get out of here. Dr. Phil even had him on a show. Dr. Phil, he's going towards the right-wing grift these days. He was on Joe Rogan. Dude, there's a hilarious dude that does impersonations of Dr. Phil. That was pretty funny. I forget his name, but he's hysterical. Him and Shane Gillis. Shane Gillis was doing Trump, and this other dude was doing Biden. Miley Cyrus is one of his clients. Dude, what's up with Miley Cyrus? What is she doing to her looks? Is it the eyebrows that make her look so different now? But there's something about her that's just like, it almost looks like alien almost. It's like, Miley Cyrus, what are you doing? I actually thought Miley Cyrus back in her old school days was beautiful. She was beautiful with the blonde hair. I had a crush on her back in the day. But now, I don't know. She's gone through a lot of transformations. I used to find her appealing back in the day, but I don't know. She morphed her image too much. Like she was like the good old gal country song, Hannah Montana on Disney. And then she kind of like, she was like a Catholic schoolgirl repressed and then went off the rocker. Which, hey, I mean, that happens. But I don't know. I liked the pre-off the rocker Miley Cyrus. Christy says, it's not what I said. It was saying he's a person in LA. He's on PBS. He does live in the Costa Mesa area. I've met him a couple of times. He's part of the Kemp Connection. Well, like I said, I'll check him out. It's interesting to me. I'd be curious what they see in the brain scans of people with autism. Considering I'm probably on the spectrum, so I'll be curious what they saw in me. Did she? I guess I wouldn't be surprised if she did, Mac. I would not be surprised. She is a great singer. Don't like her music, but her voice is solid. Yeah. She's got a voice of gold. Not a fan of glitz and gam stuff. Yeah. That all makes sense. What else was I going to say? I mean, it seems like she's older than she is. I don't even think she's that old, but it just seems like she is. But she's really not. I think I'm older than her. I mean, I'm 40. Is Miley Cyrus 40? I want to say she's maybe in her mid-30s. Let's see. Actually, oh my God, she's only 33. Why does she seem so much older than that? I mean, because she's been popular for so long. Maybe that's why. She hung out with Terry Richardson as a kid. That is not good. I don't know who that is. Who's Terry Richardson? Miley Cyrus's Flowers is my theme song. When I got divorced the second time. There you go. I also liked Wrecking Ball. Yes, unfortunately, they did do that, Mac. They did. The same with the Nickelodeon girls, right? The place was a terror, apparently. I mean, you look at that woman, Amanda Bynes. I mean, she went through the ringer. But what she needs is to probably get off of the Xanax and like do more health related things. I mean, it's easy for me to say, of course, but it's when you go through that as a kid, not good for you. I mean, there's a reason why most of these child stars go off the rails for a little while. Look at Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone. I mean, he used to be a heroin addict. He went off the rails. When you're filthy rich as a kid, you miss your childhood a little bit. Because he was an Uncle Buck too, wasn't he? Seems older, probably burning the candle at both ends. Yeah, could be. Richard is a photographer who takes sexually provocative pics of teen girls. Yeesh. That doesn't sound too good. She seems older than that, I guess, because yeah. I think it's just because she's been in the public eye for so long. So it's hard to know their age. I think Macaulay Culkin is maybe a year or two older than me. Yeah, I feel bad for Amanda too. She's not she doesn't look too happy in her pics. And so she's going through a rough spot. I mean, I imagine she's doing okay financially still, I would think. But I don't know. I don't know if she's worked. Maybe she isn't doing well financially, but you would think, unless she's doing poorly financially, she would at least have the resources to go to therapy or do whatever. Amanda Bynes is very young still. I'm not sure how old she is. You out of here, Olivia? You have a good one, miss. Let's see how old Amanda Bynes is. Oh, she's only 1 year younger than me. April 3rd, 1986. I, March 3rd, 1985. So I'm 1 year and 1 month older than her. A lot of kids these days look older because they get all this stuff done to them. Yeah, that's certainly a thing too. Hopefully Amanda exposes all of her abusers. Seems like she is definitely pointing out the one main abuser at the time, and that's good. 86 is Amanda Bynes. I'm 85. Oh my God, then add on the externally applied narrative projection, and it's the perfect recipe for hijacking one's reality. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But let's listen to some more borderline mother here.
Mothers with borderline personality disorder, BPD, struggle to keep their heads above water. They cling desperately to whoever is near and can pull their own children into the blackness. Borderline mothers are intense, unpredictable, and sometimes volatile.
And that's a good point there too. They pull people under when others try to save them and rescue them. That's a big thing for people to remember. When you try to save a borderline, make sure you don't drown yourself in the process, because if they don't want to help themselves, that's easily what can happen.
One day they may see their children as angelic. Other days, their rage or sarcasm can shatter their children's souls. Mothers with several children may perceive one child as all good and another as no good, splitting and projecting contradictory feelings about themselves onto different children.
What is that? Golden child, the all good child, and then a scapegoat, the all bad child. So people don't normally talk about this in terms of borderlines, but people talk about it with narcissists. But borderlines have a version of it too.
Borderline mothers go off, over the emotional edge, falling into despair or exploding into tirades. Yet at other times, they may be loving, supportive, and nurturing mothers. If researchers are correct in their estimate that approximately 6 million people in the United States suffer from BPD, the number of children living with borderline parents could be staggering. Children who grow up with borderline mothers live in a make-believe world that is neither fiction nor fantasy. Borderland is an emotional world where loving mothers resemble storybook characters, helpless waifs, frightened hermits, bossy queens, or vindictive witches.
This whimsically dangerous world is filled with contradiction and fraught with emotional storms that defy prediction.
A 7-year-old patient drew a picture of her borderline mother as a wicked witch, threatening to turn her into a frog with the wave of a magic wand. Trapped in a world that others cannot see, feel, or understand, the borderline's child feels hopelessly lost. Laura saw her mother as a self-centered queen who periodically transformed into a witch. Christina Crawford, the adopted daughter of actress Joan Crawford, grew up with a mother like Laura's and described her experience in her famous autobiography, "Each time I read headlong into an abyss, that black hole where nothing followed logically, where fabrication and anger and turmoil ruled supreme, that place where there was no help and no peace, no escape from the juggernaut of chaos. From her throne in the eye of the hurricane, brandishing her magic wand of obsession, ruled the queen of chaos herself, Mommy Dearest." Because BPD was previously misdiagnosed as schizophrenia, no reliable way exists to estimate the number of adult children with BPD mothers. BPD was first identified as a formal diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders in 1980, 3 years after Joan Crawford's death. Confusion, controversy, and misdiagnosis are not surprising, considering the growing number of individuals who suffer from borderline personality disorder. BPD has been ascribed to personalities as diverse as Susan Smith, a vilified mother who drowned her 2 young sons in 1994, and the late Diana, Princess of Wales, the caring princess. Charlotte DuPont, the Civil War heiress to the DuPont powder mill fortune, and Sylvia Plath, the award-winning author who committed suicide in 1963, may also have suffered from BPD. The tragedy that marked the lives of these uncommon women could well be attributed to an increasingly common disorder that is transmitted from mother to child. Emotional intensity, impulsivity, unpredictability, and fear of abandonment are symptoms observable primarily by those who have an intimate relationship with the borderline. Casual acquaintances, co-workers, or neighbors are less likely to witness the borderline's sudden shifts in mood, self-destructive behavior, paranoid distortions, and obsessive ruminations. Like Alice in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, children in Borderland are puzzled by the contradictions of their world and live on the fine line between sanity and insanity. Although she can function extraordinarily well in other roles, mothering is the single most daunting task for the borderline female. Her fear of abandonment and her tendency to experience separation as rejection or betray the borderline mother and her children in a struggle for survival.
It's a big one to remember. They view separation as abandonment and betrayal. That can certainly be the case.
The child is emotionally imprisoned. Children must separate to survive, but separation threatens their mother's survival. The following thoughts are common among children with borderline mothers. 1.
Pay attention to these. These are important.
I never know what to expect. 2. I don't trust her. 3. She says it didn't happen. 4. She makes me feel terrible. 5. Everyone else thinks she's great. 6. It's all or nothing. 7. She's so negative. 8. She flips out. 9. Sometimes I can't stand her. 10. She drives me crazy. I never know what to expect. They don't seem to have any rules in particular.
And there's another one. So another big difference between borderline and narcissism. Narcissists, feelings of grandiosity and superiority. Borderlines, not so much. They're not going to appear to be so grandiose a lot of times. They're not going to have those feelings of superiority. One of the bigger differences also is narcissists, they can appear more put together at first. Borderlines, on the other hand, they usually have more issues on the surface, like the mood disorders, substance issues, volatility, the intense relationships, etc. Now, narcissists, of course, they'll have issues too, but usually they just mask them better in the beginning. Mother-in-law was like this. Ooh. Is it still your mother-in-law? That movie was brave at the time. They didn't have these terms then. They could feel it, show it, but not necessarily define it. Honor them. I honor them. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Jewel.
At least, if there are, nobody attends to them, and you've no idea how confusing it is. Erik Erikson explained that the first stage of psychological development in children is trust versus basic mistrust. Erikson claimed that the infant's first developmental achievement is the ability to tolerate the mother's absence without undue anxiety, because she has become an inner certainty. Consistency, continuity, and sameness of experience are essential to the development of trust and security for children. Unfortunately, the hallmarks of borderline behavior are inconsistency, unpredictability, and inappropriate intensity. Because borderlines were abused, neglected, or suffered a traumatic loss as children, they are desperately afraid of abandonment. They seek emotional control over others, even threatening abandonment in order not to be abandoned themselves.
Their rules and expectations are vague, non-existent, unreasonable, rigid, or unpredictably enforced.
Children with borderline mothers experience chronic anxiety because they are uncertain of their mother's behavior. Laura's mother was inconsistent and had difficulty maintaining structure. When Laura was a child, she was forbidden from playing with some of her friends, except when her mother felt ill. When her mother was tired or sick, the only rule was, "Don't bother me." By the time she was an adolescent, her mother gave up enforcing rules. Laura enjoyed the lack of structure when she was a teenager, but as a child, she was frustrated and confused. When Laura visited her mother as an adult, her mother admonished her, asking, "Why don't you ever call me?" But when Laura telephoned, her mother sounded annoyed, answering the phone impatiently and asking, "What? What do you want?" Interactions with borderline mothers often leave the child feeling guilty and confused. Joan Crawford, on the other hand, rigidly enforced unreasonable rules that suited her needs rather than her children's needs. Christina explained that her mother programmed every minute of the day, allowing exactly half an hour for eating each meal and for washing the dishes. Christina lamented that her mother's moods fluctuated so dramatically, despite rigid rules, that she was never certain of how she might be treated. "I never knew whether it would be a big hug of loving affection or a verbal slap in the face." Children of borderlines never know, from one minute to the next, how their mother feels about them. Like the game, she loves me not, the mother's moods can suddenly change from affection to rage, creating an uncertain and insecure emotional environment. Winnicott emphasized the importance of the child's need for the good enough mother, who provides enough consistency and calmness so that the child is not overwhelmed with anxiety. Without structure and predictability in their emotional world, children have no reality based upon which to build self-esteem and security.
And notice, as you listen more to this, you'll realize that a lot of the bad qualities of anyone have been simply outsourced to just narcissists or psychopaths, right? That's what you'll notice is that, oh, these behaviors, it sounds like she's talking about a narcissist, right? And it's like, well, really what's happened is all of the bad qualities, most people just consider them narcissistic qualities now, when in reality, that's not exactly true. There can be borderline versions like she's talking about here. So, and it's just easier, right? When people talk about the behaviors of a narcissist, it's easier to say narcissist because you say borderline. Oh no. Then you're going to get the self-aware borderline community on your ass. And they're going to tell you, not everyone's like that. And blah, 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 blah. And so people just don't. People don't. And they'd rather just say, oh, well, the narcissist. It's simpler. You won't get as much pushback. And so I think that's what happens. Doesn't mean it's accurate. Like, I think this happens too. This happens too. But it's just not as acceptable to talk about it.
I don't trust her. There's no use trying, she said. One can't believe impossible things. Trust is a major issue between borderlines and their children. Children cannot trust the borderline mother for many reasons. 1, she is manipulative. 2, she distorts the truth and may even blatantly lie. 3, she may physically harm them. 4, she is unpredictable. 5, she overreacts. 6, she is impulsive. 7, she has poor judgment. 8, she has an unreliable memory. 9, she is inconsistent. 10, she is intrusive. Like Alice, who confided in the Cheshire Cat, children of borderlines may learn to trust a pet more than their own mother. Jerome Kroll, a psychiatrist specializing in the treatment of borderlines, explains that the cognitive style seen in borderlines consists of a lack of focus or attention to the matter at hand, a balanced understanding. Borderline mothers create their own reality, one that is rarely confirmed by their children or others. Regardless of how outrageous the mother's perspective may be, borderline mothers may punish their children for expressing their own views, beliefs, and feelings. Laura questioned her mother's assertion that she was close to bankruptcy. Because Laura knew that her mother earned a substantial income, she suggested consulting a financial planner. When her mother snarled back, "You have no idea how this world works," Laura was caught off guard and felt belittled by her mother's response. Like Alice in Through the Looking Glass, Laura questioned her own view of reality. "Try again," the White Queen demanded of Alice. "Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Borderline mothers negate the child's perspective by implying that the child's perspective is wrong. Laura was rebuked for not sharing her mother's belief that they were desperately poor, yet her mother's perceptions fluctuated with her mood. She felt demeaned by Laura's recommendation to consult a financial planner. Subsequently, her mother responded by demeaning Laura. Borderline mothers feel betrayed and attacked when others do not validate their feelings and perceptions. Unfortunately, they reject, abandon, punish, or vilify those whom they perceive as disloyal.
And notice again, many of yours are very similar, right, to a narcissist behavior, but they're different. They're doing them for a different reason. There's the narcissistic version of these behaviors, and now she's going over the borderline cause of these behaviors. Very interesting. And yeah, okay, I don't talk about it with them because they're just not psychologically inclined. It doesn't interest them. Like, they're not into nonfiction in that regard. Some of my family likes history, but it's not lost on me that I became so into it and no one else in my family is. At least not in this respect. I'm the only one. I never talked to my family. I went no contact on them starting back in 2006. There's no point in talking to any of them about narcissism. Yeah, and that's how I kind of see it too. I never wish harm on anyone, even though I'm an asshole. I pray for... Oh, dear. Oh, well, you got it, Michelle. I'm glad you found me here too. We went over a couple shorter clips from Dr. Ramani and Christian John. Christian John is hypervigilance on IG. He's going to be joining Dr. Salerno and I next week. So we'll take a look at that. Can people have both NPD and BPD, Jared? Officially, yes. Officially, yes. They can be comorbid, but I do think the operating systems are a little bit different. My family and friends have zero interest in these topics or my healing, although sometimes they tolerate a wee bit of me talking about it. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Is it borderlines who can have hallucinations? I think in severe cases, they can have some psychosis. But generally, you think hallucinations, you think schizophrenia a lot of times. My wife went no contact as well. The rest of her family were just as bad. Yeah, so Christian John would say they can't be comorbid at all. Dr. Salerno would say 60% of them can be comorbid with another cluster B disorder. Why is that? Well, it's because when they're diagnosing by behaviors, there's certainly a lot of overlap, as this proves, right? As you're listening to these behaviors, sure, a lot of these behaviors sound like a narcissist behavior, right? So if you're diagnosing by the DSM, you could definitely diagnose them with both. That being said, I do think a borderline operating system is a little bit different than a narcissistic operating system. But as you can see, the cause of the behaviors is different, though. There's a different motivating force. So there's something to keep in mind. And it doesn't make it any less harmful. I mean, a borderline mother or father can be very harmful, just like a narcissistic parent can be harmful.
Creating a terrifying dilemma for their children. During her adolescence, the lack of trust between Laura and her mother was evident in her mother's tendency to hug and sniff her at the same time. Her mother used such covert methods in order to determine whether or not Laura might be drinking alcohol or smoking marijuana.
Sounded like Joe Biden there for a minute.
Naturally, her mother's hugs felt insincere, and Laura resented the use of affection to mask suspicion.
Children of borderlines feel helpless when their mothers invade their privacy, manipulate them, invalidate their feelings, and distort the truth. Borderlines distort the truth because their perceptions are distorted. In one instance, a borderline mother claimed that her daughter had been sexually abused by her ex-husband. The daughter was appalled that her mother would make such a claim. The mother, however, had been sexually abused by her own father and interpreted a goodbye kiss between her daughter and ex-husband as evidence of sexual abuse.
What does that sound like? A version of a distortion, a projected distortion of what was true. She was projecting her own bad experiences onto the situation, even though it wasn't true. Very dangerous, especially with that kind of accusation.
Distortion is an unconscious way of processing information that reflects the individual's reality. Distortion misleads and aggravates family members, who may take a borderline statement at face value before discovering the facts. Laura grew weary of her mother's overreactions and learned to disregard her mother's statements such as, "Something terrible just happened." Borderlines tend to catastrophize and panic easily.
"Stop everything and help me now!"
May mean they lost their car keys. "I have a terrible headache." May mean, "Leave me alone." "I had a car accident." May mean a grocery cart scratched the car. Some borderlines consciously distort the truth in order to prevent abandonment, maintain self-esteem, or avoid conflict. Others may lie to evoke sympathy, attention, and concern. From the borderline's perspective, however, lying feels essential to survival. Although not all borderlines consciously lie, all borderlines experience perceptual distortions. When desperation drives behavior such as lying or stealing and do not feel guilt or remorse.
Apologies are rare, therefore, and borderlines may be confused about why others expect them to feel remorse.
They believe the others would do what they did in order to survive. Their explanation is succinct, "But I had to." Thus, the borderline is unconcerned with the consequences of lying because she feels she had no other option.
The other thing to note here, too, you'll notice the extremes here, right? Where, there are some people who could be a little emotionally immature or a little bit toxic. But what she's talking about are like severe things. So if someone's truly had a borderline parent, they're going to relate to this. And then the people that just had more of an immature parent or the slightly dysfunctional parent, it's not the same. It's the same thing if someone has a full blown narcissistic parent, right? That's just in a different league than someone whose parent is just a little bit immature. It's not even close.
Borderline mothers who habitually lie are especially destructive because they destroy their children's trust. Because they rarely apologize for their behavior, they lead their children to believe that the child is wrong rather than the mother. Their survival instinct can lead to many behaviors that others consider abhorrent.
When the borderline is hurt or frightened, she feels that her survival is at stake. Thus, morality is temporarily suspended.
Christina Crawford describes the child's predicament. I guess it was impossible for an adult who had not been present to believe that she was the one who was lying and I was telling the truth. She was always so convincing. Conflicts and disagreements may escalate into violence because borderline mothers have difficulty managing the intensity of their own emotions. Consequently, physical fights are common between some borderline mothers and their children. In such circumstances, children have had to call the police, escape their homes through windows, flee to neighbors' homes, rescue siblings, and intervene in physical fights between their parents. Some borderline mothers may physically or verbally attack their children in the middle of the night when the children, unfortunately, are most vulnerable. In one case, a patient felt so unsafe that she slept with a steak knife under her pillow until she was 18, when she moved away from home. She says it didn't happen. Alice said nothing. She had never been so much contradicted in all her life before, and she felt that she was losing her temper. Borderlines often forget painful experiences that their children remember vividly. Studies show that chronically intense emotions damage the part of the brain that is responsible for memory.
Chronic emotional stress exposes the brain to an excess of glucocorticoids, a hormone that normally help the brain cope with stress.
The hippocampus, which controls memory functioning, contains a high number of glucocorticoid receptors and is therefore susceptible to damage. Because borderline mothers experienced overwhelming emotional distress as children, areas in their brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation may be damaged. Studies using magnetic resonance imaging to examine the brains of females who were abused as children found that the left hippocampus was actually smaller than those in subjects from a control group.
And so the question with that would be, when did that get there? Was it there from birth or was it there post-abuse? You won't know. You don't know the answer to that question unless you did it at both times. But that would also determine, right? Oh, if it's there from birth, that's more of a genetic cause of BPD. If it wasn't there until the abuse, well, now it's C-PTSD at the least, and maybe that's an argument for the environmental component of a personality disorder at that rate, right? But you have to know when it happened. That's a big thing.
Consequently, borderline mothers may not remember experiences recalled by their children. A vicious cycle results as children with borderline mothers are immersed in an emotionally intense environment that, if unmitigated, may also damage their cognitive functioning. Because the borderline mother is unable to remember intensely emotional events, she has learned from experience. She may repeat destructive behaviors without recalling previous consequences. Laura and her sister remembered many episodes when their mother was set off by some trivial incident such as a misplaced item of clothing. When confronted years later with her behavior, they denied ever having lost control and stated, "How dare you say I did such things after all I've done for you?" Therapists report that borderline mothers are often unable to confirm their children's traumatic memories. It is impossible to learn from experience if the experience is not remembered. Thus, Borderlines become trapped in repetitive, self-destructive behaviors. They may spend more money than they have sex without protecting themselves, drink too much, smoke too much, or eat too much. Although they feel terrible later, they may repeat the behavior because they do not remember the consequences. Their behavior alarms family members and can endanger their children. Some adult children recall riding in cars when their mother was driving drunk or having utilities disconnected as the result of the borderline's impulse spending. Some recall literally saving their mother's life. One night, Laura noticed the smell of burning carpet and extinguished a cigarette her mother had dropped while smoking in bed. Unfortunately, her mother continued to smoke in bed after the near tragedy. When borderlines abuse drugs or alcohol, they can become psychotic. Christina Crawford described many episodes of her mother's horrific night raids. Psychotic behavior, however, is not limited to rage. Equally terrifying is the borderline mother who dissociates, withdraws into despair, self-mutilates, or attempts suicide. Fear and despair can also trigger. One patient recalled disturbing memories of his mother locking herself in the bathroom and threatening to kill herself as the patient, at age 7, tried to calm her down. Other patients report mothers who threatened to run away and mothers who actually left home. Psychosis can occur when any emotion becomes unmanageable. Studies indicate that people who were exposed to chronic stress in childhood have higher levels of somatostatin, a stress-related hormone and neurotransmitter, in their spinal fluid. Severe stress in childhood appears to have long-term effects on the brain and immune system. Children of borderlines are at risk, therefore, for a variety of physical and emotional disorders as adults. They may also be prone to stress-related physical symptoms, such as colitis or migraine headaches. Christina Crawford once visited a psychiatrist who asked her if she knew what might be causing her headaches. Christina stated simply, "Yes, I hate my mother."
And so, but this is also true, right, of people that are in relationships with narcissists too. There's all sorts of health conditions they can have, autoimmune disorders, hormone disruptions, cancer diagnosis. I've even heard before too. I mean, this stuff is no joke. Like, it impacts your, what's your word for it? Your immune system. Being around toxic people impacts your immune system and your health, weakens you.
Adrenaline causes the blood vessels in the brain to constrict and forces blood to the muscles as a necessary preparation for the fight or flight response. Following the stressful interaction, the blood vessels dilate, causing the pain of a migraine headache.
Candle and Sudderth explain that some researchers believe that a migraine is actually a dysfunction of the nervous system and an unstable threshold in the brain.
When internal or external stressors increase, this threshold is exceeded and a migraine headache is produced. It's sort of like one part of your body says, "Don't step over this line," but you do anyway. For children with borderline mothers, migraines prevent the child from acting on unbearable feelings of rage. The child is paralyzed with pain. The unpredictable behavior of the borderline mother can trigger adrenaline surges, yet children cannot respond with a fight or flight response without suffering negative repercussions. Consequently, many adult children of borderlines develop headaches after visiting with their mothers or talking to them on the telephone. Candle and Sudderth explain that researchers have found that the speed of blood flow in the middle cerebral artery decreases during a migraine attack. Somehow, your brain turns on the yellow light and the blood flow slows down. Many children with borderline mothers function with a brain continually flashing caution. "She makes me feel terrible." "It might end, you know," said Alice to herself, "in my going out altogether, like a candle." Fear of abandonment is the most common symptom of BPD and is shared by all borderlines. Many researchers and clinicians observe that borderlines fear falling into the abyss when faced with rejection or abandonment. Feeling is sometimes described as survival anxiety. The borderline feels numb, disconnected, and unreal. Thus, borderlines invest enormous effort in preventing abandonment, and family members may feel suffocated, intimidated, and controlled. Borderlines may display dramatic or hysterical behavior such as gasping and crying, sending surges of adrenaline through family members and triggering the startle response. Overreactions to illness and accidents and dramatic displays of rage or withdrawal leave family members feeling sucked in and emotionally depleted. The borderline's children can feel trapped and suffocated, as if their own lives might be extinguished by their mother's neediness. Just as a 2-year-old clings to the parent when faced with separation, borderlines have difficulty letting go, saying goodbye, hanging up the phone, ending conversations, and may become suicidal when relationships end. The other person feels held back, dragged down, or pulled under in response to the borderline's message. "Don't leave me." Borderlines can self-destruct as a result of their fear of abandonment and often use emotional blackmail to control others. Understandably, children of borderlines struggle to manage feelings of shame, guilt, anxiety, and rage.
Now, I would believe that borderlines may have more guilt and shame, if I had to guess. And also to note the emotional blackmail, that's something they will certainly do. They'll see the "I will end my life if you leave," or "If you don't do this, I'll do this." And that's where people will feel trapped by their presence because they're not afraid to, "I will end the relationship if you don't do this. I'll walk away. I'll do this. I'll do that." And the requests that they're making can be pretty silly or ridiculous. So it seems ridiculous to the person hearing it. But people can have a trauma bond with a borderline as well. And when someone doesn't understand this stuff, like they didn't before 15 years ago, 10 years ago, almost no one understood this. They were like, "What the hell is wrong with this person? Are they depressed? Is it bipolar?" There just wasn't as much thinking about personality disorders back then. And so people would say to the women that were like this, "Oh, it's just crazy, crazy woman." Just like the narcissistic men were just assholes, the borderline women were probably bitches or crazy. And that's the extent of what people would say about them to their friends. "Oh, she's crazy. She's a bitch." And if the guy was abusive, they'd, "Oh, he's a freaking asshole."
Shame. When a child disagrees with the borderline mother or does not satisfy her needs or wishes, the borderline will attempt to shame, punish, degrade, or vilify the child. In a starkly candid interview, Joan Crawford revealed her draconian philosophy of disciplining 8-year-old Christina. "It is not easy to discipline her, but I am forced to when she insists on doing things her own way. I find punishing her by hurting her dignity is very effective."
Brutal. Punishing her by hurting her dignity is the most effective. Yeesh.
Borderline mothers may use denigration as a method of discipline without being aware of its destructiveness. Those who use it intentionally are severely disturbed, but are not likely to seek treatment because they believe in their sovereign right to discipline their children as they see fit. In their view, they're doing their job as a parent. They believe that a child must be hurt in order to learn appropriate behavior because that is what they were taught as children. Only mothers who are unable to remember the pain of their own denigration are likely to denigrate their children. Shame extinguishes the sense of entitlement to one's existence and can trigger self-destructive fantasies in children. Mary Todd Lincoln's stepmother referred to her as a limb of Satan. One of Mrs. Lincoln's biographers explained, "To be shamed and humiliated is to feel a disgrace to the whole self."
So Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife, was referred to as a limb of Satan. Do you?
Unfortunately, borderline mothers project their own shame onto others. Anxiety. Children of borderlines grow up in fear. The fear that mother will hurt herself or them. Either way, their survival could be at stake. My patient Laura was unable to leave home without experiencing separation anxiety, the fear that something terrible might happen to her mother or herself. Some days she left the house screaming, "I hope you die!" But by the time she got to school, she felt sick to her stomach. Children of borderlines become preoccupied with reading their mother's mood in order to ward off a possible crisis or to prevent being attacked. their emotional energy is invested in contradictory positions, fighting with their mother as well as protecting her. They may have difficulty concentrating on anything else. Borderlines experience separation anxiety in part because disturbing memories of previously abusive and denigrating experiences are most likely to surface when the borderline is alone. Laura's mother told her that memories of being molested by her own father flashed through her mind at night. Sometimes she thought she heard his footsteps outside her bedroom door. The sounds and images made her feel crazy. Laura's mother begged her not to go out and sometimes feigned illness to keep her from leaving. Laura hated to leave her mother alone, yet was desperate to get away from her. Although children of borderlines grow up afraid, they
What does that sound like? Traumatic cognitive dissonance, right? Don't want to leave her alone, but you want to get the hell out of there. Torn.
learn not to show their fear and seem oblivious to painful or dangerous situations. They may refuse to cry and learn to shut down when hurt or upset. An adolescent patient explained, "After a while, you become immune. You don't feel anything anymore." The ability to conceal their feelings is adaptive for children in Borderland because some borderline mothers use fear to control their children. Christina Crawford recalled the horror of being locked in a linen closet with the lights off because her mother knew that Christina was afraid of the dark. Borderline mothers may threaten to call the police, cut off financial support, threaten physical harm, or take away loved objects. Both Laura and Christina had loved objects destroyed as punishment. Christina was forced to give away her own Christmas presents. Laura's mother smashed and broke her favorite record albums. Such children learn to hide what they love. When parents use fear to control their children, they shatter the sacred bond of trust.
So children of borderlines learn to hide what they love because the borderline mother will destroy what they love as punishment. And so Christine Crawford's daughter would have to give away her Christmas gifts as a punishment. And then the other one, their records were destroyed. Not too good, but very cruel. Very cruel.
Guilt. When Laura was 3 years old, her mother told her that God punishes bad little girls. Being good meant not disagreeing with her mother.
Huh! What does that sound like? Sounds like narcissists do that too, right?
As an adult, her mother punished her by refusing to return phone calls, answer letters, or respond to email. She would cut her off until Laura's guilt and anxiety built to an intolerable level. Only then would her mother respond. Laura felt completely emotionally invaded, as if her mother could read her mind. From the time she was a young child, her mother used fear and guilt to control her. Her mother was unable to respect Laura's need for privacy and lacked appropriate boundaries. She listened in on phone conversations and later used the information to humiliate Laura. Children of borderlines may suffer from separation guilt. Christina Crawford felt that her mother expected not only complete devotion, but wanted to become her. Although Christina felt compassion for her mother, she was torn with guilt for wanting a life of her own. Borderlines view separateness as betrayal and test loyalty with comments such as, "If you love me, you will do this," or "You would never do this if you really loved me." Children must constantly prove their love by providing total devotion at the expense of their own needs. Young children naturally fear the withdrawal of their mother's love. When borderlines feel betrayed, they may cut off communication, support, and resources. Adult children may be cut out of their mother's will. Photographs may be removed or destroyed, and family members may be forbidden to mention the name of the offending individual. When enraged, the borderline mother may declare, "I have no children," indicating her desire to wipe them out of her mind, a terrifying emotional experience for a child. Borderlines are extraordinarily sensitive to criticism and expect allegiance from their children. Because the borderline often turns to her children as allies, her children have no choice but to side with her.
It's a good question here by Kat. I'll put up on the screen. What do you think is worse, a BPD mom or a narc dad? And to what I would say is they're both bad in their own way. I think there's a special kind of pain when your mother Is the narcissist or borderline the person that's supposed to be giving you the closest thing to unconditional love? And yeah, you get to do that too, but especially in the earlier years, there's just something special about the connection with a mother. So that can have a lot of harmful impact, especially on the daughters. So if a daughter has a borderline mother or a narcissistic mother, that can do a number on them. Narcissistic dad, now for a daughter, if it's the golden child, might not be as bad. Now they still get conditional love, but they're on the pedestal at that point. But if you're the scapegoat of the narcissistic father, oof, now you're going to go through all the cycles of abuse. Not very good. So they're both bad in their own ways. We'll say that, Kat. I think the worst thing is when someone is gaslighting and lying to you because that makes you so crazy and that messes with your psyche. Yes, it does. I used to think all moms did the look, call the look, mom, look. No, yeah, they don't all. They don't all. There's some emotionally stable ones out there. Yes, I would say so too, Thrive. Most of this can apply. It'll look a little bit different, though, I would say, in a borderline male. So what I would say in a borderline male is you're probably more likely to see like alcohol or substance issues. You're probably more likely to see anger as opposed to as many guilt trips. And again, they'll still do guilt trips, though. They're not above them. Yeah, I mean, borderlines that had a narcissistic father, yes, or narcissistic mother, they'll absolutely find that familiar because that was their initial trauma bond. Now, not gender specific, just to the extent that men and women are different. So, yeah, you can have the same disorder, but it can still look a little bit different. By testosterone in men, I mean, most men, if not all men, have more testosterone than women. So testosterone absolutely impacts your mood, impacts your behaviors. And so the disorders will look a little bit different, even though it's the same disorder. I'm really grateful that it did not turn out like this, despite what happened to me. You are lucky, Danielle. Sometimes there's things that there's nothing else that explains it besides luck. Kat says, I thought they were attracted to each other. Yes, they are, Kat, because the narcissist, they like the idealization, right? And it becomes exciting for them sometimes too, because the borderline's unpredictable a lot of times. And they have those intense highs. The narcissist loves those intense highs, right? And they'll chase them. But also when the narcissist, if he's on top or she's on top in terms of who's more in control, they'll like that devaluing because the borderline, if that fear of abandonment comes and they're being devalued, they'll like put up with it for longer. And like, oh no, I can't have this person like abandoning me, even though they're devaluing me. So it can becomes a vicious cycle. It always reminds me of Rihanna's Love the Way You Lie. That's probably a narcissist in a borderline relationship, if I had to guess. Are there also covert vulnerable borderlines? They would call that quiet borderline. So in this audiobook, she talks about waifs. That's probably more like a covert borderline in a way. It's a quiet version of borderline. It's not the dysfunction and the intensity is on the inside. It might not portray itself outwardly, but internally, they are a mess and it's extremely chaotic, right? So, but they don't say it. It might come out in ways like cutting. It might come out in ways such as substance abuse, but internally, right, they can still have those issues going on. And so it can appear more covert or it can appear like a quiet borderline. Kat says borderlines tend to be the ones who'll hand their ass to them. Happen too. Absolutely, because if the borderline splits on them, for example, and they go from seeing them from all good to all bad, the narcissist will get very upset about that because they'll lose control. And when they lose control, what do narcissists do? They will try to regain control. But when the borderline is split, what happens then? Well, then what happens is the borderline wants nothing to do with it. And then she'll toy with them probably until maybe she can finally see him in a positive light again. And narcissists toy with the borderlines too, don't get me wrong. I've heard so many times about dads being protective of their daughters, and that never happened with me. And unfortunately, it wasn't from my daughter either. Yeah, it's no good. That's a shame. Because some dads will be protective of their daughters, but other dads will have their daughter be the scapegoat. Or maybe the daughter will be a black sheep, and that's no good. I'll show my kids Mommy Dearest and tell them, ain't you lucky daddy didn't do I don't know how well they'll take that, Mac. Sable bond, it looks like you're right. Yep. Oh, it's intentional, like depression, etc. Internalized. Yes, internalized. No, back in the day when my mother was about abused sexually, she was probably in the 60s. She was blamed for it. In her 60s? Oh my gosh. Rise Weaver. Yeah, I mean, borderlines can absolutely be toxic in their relationships without a doubt. I mean, the splitting can be very hurtful and harmful to other people, where they do one small thing. And if you talk to a borderline about some of this, they'll say, well, it might have just been a pattern. But here's the thing. It's not always a pattern. If it's a pattern, I wouldn't even consider that splitting anymore. But what I would say is, if it's truly a split, that's brutal. That's brutal. You'll go from being on the pedestal to, no, they hate you. They hate you and they split and they can't see you in a positive light anymore because they lack object constancy, or it's also called object permanence. I still believe that victims get blamed. I recently watched a documentary about Kevin Spacey, and it totally explains how it happens. And these are men? Yes. Yes. Kevin Spacey's he's something else. So glad my dad was a good, stable dad and shielded me from mom. Yeah, you got lucky with that, Crazy. It's good. A lot of the enabler parents, they don't do that, unfortunately. But it sounds like you had a good one. Yes, Danielle, I wish I would have been healed before having my children. Of course, ideally, for sure. But that's where humans, our biology isn't always on par with our maturity. So, like, we're able to have kids long before we have kind of the maturity to truly do it. Like, we might have nowhere near the emotional maturity needed, but we're physically capable of fathering and mothering kids. So it's an interesting dynamic. I fancied Kevin Spacey in the movie American Beauty. You fancied him? And they called him the Seeker? An American woman? American woman! I'm the scapegoat of a narcissistic father, and I can't tell you how shitty it is. Yes. Not very good. What's wrong with you, Kat? I don't know. Maybe you're just special in your own way. Right? It's not powder persa, it's a compulsive repetition and abusive. Correct. Yes.
Even if they must turn against their own father. They know the price they will pay if they do not support her, and they fear her annihilating rage. Rage. Sometimes I feel like killing her, are words that reflect the rage within some children of borderlines. When a psychiatrist asked serial killer Edmund Kemper why he murdered his mother, Kemper stated, "I couldn't handle the hate." Female children are less likely to attack their mother physically, although their anger is no less intense. Christina Crawford expressed the child's murderous rage. "In that moment, I hated her so much, I wanted to kill her. It didn't even matter to me that I'd have to spend the rest of my life in jail." The borderline's children can become extraordinarily frustrated because no one understands that they are drowning emotionally.
No one sees beneath the surface of their mother's facade that she is pulling her own children into her darkness.
What does that sound like? the person that can't see what's going on behind doors. But behind closed doors, it's a completely different story. Even some borderlines, in particular the queens and the witch versions, they're probably best able to do it. More likely the queens, I would say. The waifs is probably different because if the waifs might present in public like not that bad, they might just seem a little bit depressed, but behind closed doors is a different story.
Some children fear that in order to live, their mother must die. Everyone else thinks she's great. I know they're talking nonsense, Alice thought to herself, and it's foolish to cry about it. So she brushed away her tears and went on, as cheerfully as she could. In her book, Cognitive Behavioral Treatment of the Borderline Patient, Marcia Linehan describes the facade of normalcy that borderlines present to others, particularly in work settings where they feel confident and in control. Linehan explains that the borderline's apparent competency leads others to assume that she is equally capable of coping in other roles. When coworkers hear the borderline mother complain about her children, they assume that the children are troubled rather than the mother. Unfortunately, for their children, this means that their private experience is unlikely to be validated by others. Laura's friends could not understand why her mother drove her crazy. They never witnessed her mother's attacks because Laura avoided having her friends stay for an extended period of time. When Laura told them about her mother's dark side, they said, "But your mother seems so nice."
Sound familiar? Especially with a narcissistic parent too, but they seem so nice. They're so helpful. You're so lucky to have them, but they just don't know. They don't know what's going on behind closed doors.
Laura's sister was the only person who validated her experience. One time when Laura's boyfriend was at her house, her mother flipped out just because she thought my skirt was too short. Laura was embarrassed, but also relieved that someone other than her sister had witnessed the attack. In social situations, the borderline mother can be engaging, gracious, and endearing. Christina Crawford was particularly annoyed with the facade her mother presented when entertaining. Christina summarized the child's feelings regarding the dichotomy of the private versus public persona of the borderline mother. "I just wanted to scream that it was all a fake." Remarkably, Christina's account of her experience continues to be challenged. In his biography entitled Joan Crawford, The Last Word, Fred Lawrence Giles contends that one of the chief flaws in Christina's memoir is a distortion of known facts in Joan's life, or sometimes a questionable interpretation of those facts. Giles fails to consider the possibility that the distortion of facts might have originated with Joan Crawford. Emotional manipulation.
That's a good one. So this person was basically a flying monkey of Joan Crawford defending her. And Christina Lawson says, well, actually, that person just probably didn't stop to think that maybe Joan Crawford herself was the one distorting the truth, not her daughter. But again, that can be a very invalidating thing. You're Christine Crawford, and these people are criticizing you. Oh, she's wrong. Those things are not true. Joan said so. And it's like, well, you're going to take Joan's word for it? It's like, not recommended.
And the tendency to distort facts epitomize borderline behavior. Widespread ignorance regarding BPD perpetuates the hopelessness that children with borderline parents experience. They feel abandoned by society at large whenever their reality is discounted. Carl Jung once said, "We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. His psyche should be studied, because we are the origin of all coming evil."
The borderline's children are haunted by a darkness within their mothers that others may fail to recognize until it is too late.
It's all or nothing. Once she remembered trying to box her own ears for having cheated herself in a game of croquet. She was playing against herself. For this curious child was very fond of pretending to be two people. The borderline's emotional thermostat consists of two settings, on and off. There is no middle ground. Melissa Thornton, a borderline who wrote about her own experience, explains that borderlines split things into simple, polemic pairs of good or bad, sadness or joy, black or white. Unable to grasp that something might be both good and bad, A person with BPD can only see the ends of the spectrum. Thus, the borderline's inability to experience more than one perspective at a time conveys only one side of the story and one part of the picture.
Black and white thinking. So it can look like emotional immaturity as well, but that's where the all good, all bad, or they'll take things to their extremes. It's quite obnoxious for the people that have to deal with them.
Children see themselves as reflected in the mirror of their parents' eyes. Therefore, children of borderlines may develop two contrasting perceptions of themselves.
The resulting confusion, guilt, and shame may be manifested in self-destructive tendencies, such as banging their heads against walls, hitting, or cutting themselves.
Believing in her child's basic goodness is only possible if the mother believes in her own goodness. Unfortunately, some borderlines have an inner conviction of being evil. Like most children of borderlines, Christina Crawford and Laura were confused about their identity. Hopelessness and despair can consume the borderline's child. Laura was not yet in high school when she wrote in her journal, "I'm losing my mind. Oh God, I know how it feels to be buried alive." She's so negative. "You don't know much," said the Duchess, "and that's a fact." Alice did not at all like the tone of this remark and thought it would be as well to introduce some other subject of conversation. Borderlines have negative thoughts because they have negative feelings about themselves and others. Memory difficulties, difficulty focusing attention, confused and disorganized thinking, the inability to reason logically, morbid introspection, and intrusively negative thoughts are common.
Children are subjected to deflating comments that increase despair or destroy their enthusiasm, as some borderline mothers assume that the worst possible thing will happen in any given situation.
Laura avoided talking to her mother about her problems or worries. She knew that her mother would tell her either that she was too sensitive and worried too much, or say something that made her feel worse. When children bring concerns to the attention of the borderline parent, they receive a response that either increases their distress or entirely dismisses their concern.
That sounds familiar? If you come to something with your narcissistic or borderline parent, they'll say something that either dismisses you or increases your distress. Very familiar, right? You go to your parents for support, and instead of supporting you, they give you the opposite.
A child who is worried about not passing to the next grade might be told, "And then you won't be with your friends your age. You'll be behind forever. Why didn't you study harder this year?" The borderline absorbs and intensifies the child's fear. "And then this could happen," and is unable to reassure and comfort the child. Glickow, Hughes, and Melman report that daughters of borderline mothers all reported painful memories of turning to their mother for comfort and feeling worse afterwards. When Laura was 12, she proudly announced that she was invited to accompany a friend on vacation. Her mother responded desperately, "Oh no, I gotta get you some new clothes and I don't have any money." Laura's excitement was replaced by anxiety. Borderlines can deflate the child's enthusiasm by emphasizing negative outcomes. A patient recalled dismay at her mother's reaction to the announcement of her longed-for pregnancy. Her mother's response was, "Oh no, not now," and insinuated that some horrible mistake had been made.
So the mother, when her daughter was pregnant, she made it all about her. Instead of being happy for her daughter and what she wanted, they're selfish and they made it about her.
When Christina Crawford won a part as a guest star on a television program, she telephoned her mother to share the exciting news. Her mother, however, hung up on her in the middle of their conversation. Bewildered, Christina broke into tears, wondering what had gone wrong. Later, she learned that her mother was intensely jealous of her career. Shortly thereafter, Christina became convinced that her mother could never allow her to enjoy her own success. Emotionally stable parents share their children's joy and quiet their fear. But caretaking roles are reversed for children of borderlines whose mothers are chronically upset. Children repress their fear in order to calm their mother. Situations that should frighten children may not, because they have learned not to feel. A dramatic and hopefully rare example occurs when children rescue the borderline mother from suicide attempts. Borderlines are ambivalent about their existence, but do not necessarily want to kill themselves. Their fear of living, however, may be stronger than their fear of death, placing them at risk. Acts of self-mutilation, such as cutting, burning, or hitting oneself, do not represent a death wish and should not be confused with suicidal behavior. Self-mutilation is disturbing to family members who may feel manipulated by such behavior. The borderline, however, may be expressing self-hatred, not necessarily searching for sympathy or attention.
And I've had clients that do this, and it's rough because it's like, especially if they also have suicidal idealizations, it's like, well, which one's which, right? Like, you're cutting, you're doing this, but you also have this. So it's rough. But I think the self-loathing for them is a big part of it, as opposed to the attention seeking, if I had to guess, like she said.
Occasionally, some borderlines may inadvertently succeed in committing suicide. Suicidal behavior is a constant of one's life. Threats of suicide and suicidal gestures are so commonly associated with BPD that in their absence, the diagnosis may be overlooked. Professionals and family members often fail to identify BPD when suicidality, self-destructive behavior, or depression are not present. Many borderlines do not engage in self-mutilation or suicidal behavior.
Joan Crawford apparently never attempted suicide, although her self-destruction was insidious, both through her alcoholism and her refusal to seek psychiatric treatment.
Laura's mother, however, overdosed twice, exacerbating Laura's separation anxiety and guilt. She was 8 years old the first time she saved her mother's life. Borderline mothers who threaten or attempt suicide keep their children emotionally trapped, and their children may suffer from extreme anxiety, even as adults. She flips out. "We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad." "How do you know I'm mad?" said Alice. "You must be," said the cat, "or you wouldn't have come here." When borderlines are faced with stressful situations, such as the end of a relationship, the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, rejection, or abandonment, they may become paranoid and lose touch with reality. If they abuse alcohol or drugs, their behavior can be life-threatening to themselves or others. They may feel disconnected from their body, and their memory may be impaired. They may lose track of time, lose awareness of their surroundings, and become disoriented. Some borderlines talk out loud when alone, or mutter to themselves in the presence of others. They may stare blankly, carrying on a conversation while preoccupied with the chaos of their internal state. Anyone who witnesses a psychotic episode will remember it, unless that person is a child who has witnessed it too many times. Children may repress their feelings and memories of such experiences. The mother's appearance reveals the change in her mental state. The pupils of the eyes enlarge, giving the individual a shark-like look and indicating the potential for attack or detachment from reality. If the underlying feeling is rage, the child may feel threatened. If the underlying feeling is fear, the child may panic. Psychotic episodes are traumatic because the emotions that are evoked are overwhelming.
If they are frequent, the child may numb out, dissociate, and seem oblivious to their occurrence.
Depending on their frequency, the child may believe such experiences are normal. There were times when Laura felt herself disappearing down a black hole, sinking into her mother. She dreaded the evenings when her mother drank too much and flipped out. Psychotic episodes are intensely disturbing, and Laura didn't like to talk about them. An alien seemed to emerge from her mother, muttering senselessly, tearfully, unable to recognize her own child. Laura tried to stay calm by thinking about something normal, like school or her favorite television program. But memories of the alien would haunt her for the rest of her life. Being alone with a psychotic parent is terrifying for children of any age. The night before Laura left to spend the summer with her father, her mother crawled into her bed crying. She had read a letter from Laura's father in which he told Laura how much he missed her. Laura's mother accused them of plotting against her and was certain that Laura planned to move in with him. Laura was appalled that her mother was threatened by the innocuous letter. When Laura mentioned the incident several years later, her mother had no memory of it. Ordinary mothers sleep at night. Borderline mothers do not. Borderlines dread being alone with their own thoughts. Thus, intrusive, obsessive thoughts may keep them awake at night. Noise from the radio, television, or late-night telephone calls may distract them from their anxiety and provide a sense of security. Alcohol or drug abuse increases their agitation and worsens anxiety. Although not all borderline mothers awaken their children in the middle of the night, Christina Crawford's description of her mother's night raids were among the most remembered excerpts from her famous book. Her description of a psychotic episode captures the child's terror. As the moon lit up part of her face, I could see that look in her eyes again. It was a haunted, excited look. The still of the night is broken by the stirrings of the borderline's ruminations. One patient recalled her mother entering her bedroom and rummaging through her belongings, looking for evidence of drugs. Another patient's mother awakened her father on a regular basis, rebuking him for being able to sleep when she was so upset. Sometimes I can't stand her. The queen turned crimson with fury, and after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, began screaming, "Off with her head! Off with!" Some children of borderlines secretly wish that their mother would die, not because they hate her, but because living with her seems impossible. As an adult, Laura was still drawn into the turmoil of her mother's life. Her mother was the only person on the face of the earth who could stir up her murderous rage. Yet she was terrified that her mother would someday kill herself. Linehan states, "The desire to be dead among borderline individuals is often reasonable in that it is based on lives that are currently unbearable." Laura grew weary of her mother's rampages, mood swings, depressive episodes, and her own conflicting feelings. Laura explained that her mother went on tirades. Something could set her off and she would whirl around the house like a cyclone. The warning signal was the look. The look was a piercing, threatening glare that meant, "I could kill you." When Laura was a child, her mother actually said it, with no awareness of the power of her words. Children of borderlines and survivors of hurricanes have much in common. Survival is dependent on finding a safe place, staying low, and not being fooled by the eye of the storm. When her mother found a dirty dish in Laura's bedroom or wasn't able to find her car keys, it triggered the same storm. Laura knew better than to say anything or get in her way. Her mother calmed down to catch her breath and would start in all over again, repeating the same sentence, such as, "You make me sick," a belief that Laura had already internalized. Laura could not remember the whole speech because she had learned to shut out the sound of her mother's voice. When Laura was young, the tirades terrified her, but as she grew older, she became immune to them. Children are confused by how quickly anger is forgotten. Now is all that matters to borderlines. Laura's mother could spank and scold her one minute and hug her the next. One time she threatened to get rid of her, packed her suitcase, and later the same day told her that she couldn't live without her. Contradiction breeds confusion.
Contradiction breeds confusion. That's a good one. Very consistent with what happens in a trauma bond. Very hot and cold, emotionally inconsistent.
And children may feel set up, manipulated, and provoked. Their frustration is often expressed in the words, "I just can't stand my mother." Although borderlines fear losing what they love, their rage frequently results in destroying what others love. They tend to hurt others in ways that replicate how they themselves were hurt. Borderlines may destroy what is good and loved by their children because they are intensely jealous of the loved object. They cannot give others what they do not have. When enraged, some divorced borderlines may deprive their children of contact with their father, either to punish him or the children. The most tragic scenario is that of the Median mother, who, like Medea in Greek mythology, defies the basic laws of nature by physically sacrificing her own children in response to abandonment by a husband or boyfriend. The Median mother's fear of abandonment endangers. She drives me crazy. Alice had got so much into the way of expecting nothing but out-of-the-way things to happen that it seemed quite dull and stupid for life to go on in the common way. Children with borderline mothers adjust to the chaos of their lives by learning to expect the unexpected. They associate love with fear and kindness with danger. Craziness becomes normal, and life without chaos may seem boring. They may grow up without recognizing healthy love. In one well-known definition, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It is not arrogant or rude. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Although borderline mothers may love their children as much as other mothers, their deficits in cognitive functioning and emotional regulation create behaviors that undo their love. Borderline mothers have difficulty loving their children patiently and consistently. Their love does not endure misunderstandings or disagreements. They can be jealous, rude, irritable, resentful, arrogant, and unforgiving. Healthy love is based on trust and is the essence of emotional security. Their children, therefore, may grow up without knowing the meaning of healthy love. Things never get back to normal for children with borderline mothers. As Linehan explains, over time, children and caregivers shape and reinforce extreme behaviors in each other. Children of borderlines may tune out by dissociating and disconnecting from their environment. They cannot feel embarrassed, humiliated, ridiculed, or hurt if they are no longer in their own bodies. Unfortunately, the sensation of depersonalization or dissociation makes them feel crazy.
That's a very common thing with borderlines, the dissociation. Often, if there's been a CSA, assault as a kid, a lot of the people that have had that, they'll do the dissociation like that as an adult.
Borderline mothers may subtly imply or blatantly accuse their children of being crazy with statements like, "There is something wrong with your head," or "You're out of your mind," or "You're crazy." They project their own disorganized thinking onto their children, and eventually their children may give up the battle to maintain their sanity. Christina Crawford describes the child's descent into madness. You just ease into being crazy. It doesn't happen overnight. You get tired of the constant battle with no victories. You become exhausted, hoping for the ceasefire. You lose your grip on the world slowly and drift into the chasm of your own hopelessness. Laura suffered from depersonalization for a 12-month period during middle school. She told no one about her feelings of unreality and suffered silently, having mastered the ability to pretend that everything was fine. She was living a fairy tale, pretending to be happy in a make-believe world. She had become Alice. "You know very well you're not real." "I am real," said Alice, and began to cry. "You won't make yourself a bit realer by crying," Tweedledee remarked. "There's nothing to cry about." Children of borderlines have been down the rabbit hole. They have heard the Queen of Hearts order everyone beheaded. They have attended the Mad Tea Party and argued with the Duchess for the right to think their own thoughts. They grow weary of feeling big one minute and small the next. 2. The darkness within. Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself.
Well, and perhaps that's a good place to stop there for now. That was a long little section there, too. Most enabler mothers with narc husbands do it all the time when they don't leave. Well, what I mean by extreme is the Median borderline mother kills her children to not be abandoned by them. There's an example of that with, she goes over it in the book. There's examples of this happening. And so that's when I say extreme, not just what an enabler mother will do, but more like what the borderline will do when completely up against the wall with the fear of abandonment. So that's where they said before, secondary psychopath behavior with that fear of abandonment, not good. it can be pretty dangerous. Yeah, Kat, you're a vampire like me. You're even more of a vampire than me. When do you sleep? When do you sleep? Like 6 a.m. to noon or something? My twin sister is a covert narcissist to make it seem like I'm an F up, because if she can manage to get everyone to subscribe to that reality, it will become real. Yes, they call that testing the reality, or defining reality is what that's called. Yes. Proverbially, yes, to thrive. The enablers will do that. But the literal version of it in rare cases happens as well. Mixed bag of candy disorder and overlap you can imagine. Yes. Time to make a cupper, Cat. What is that, Jolly? What is a cupper? Learning some vocabulary words here. My sister Cynthia. I thought we agreed on 4 a.m. Central Standard Time, Jared. CST? So that's 5 a.m. Yeah, she's good, Jolly. But I'm going to go over more of it on other times as well. It's just a lot to go over in one shot. Like, it'll take like 5 or 6 episodes to do it. As Jethro Tull would say, an aqua lung and a spot of tea. Aqua lung, my friend. I don't drink tea, though. Probably the only British person who doesn't. Oh. Appreciate you subscribing. Glad you did. Anyone else who isn't subscribed, please do, by the way. Like the video if you haven't liked it already as well. Salvation a la mode and a cup of tea, Cat. You going to get it? There's actually a good story in that song of the sitting on the park bench. Poor Christina. I remember that scene with the baby powder in the bathroom. Yeah, she had a rough go of it. She had a rough go of it for sure. Not good. Not good. Being ignored by someone that is supposed to love you is the worst. Yes. There's a deep, deep pain that comes with that for sure. Well, I don't blame you, Kat. Don't blame you one bit. If you don't sub, you may be a narcissist. I didn't say it. Things like, oh, don't drink coffee. I drink coffee. I have a 5-hour energy and 17 ounces of coffee every day. It's probably the upper limit of caffeine, but I have a pretty extensive supplement program. Cat Sable. Hello from Colorado, Angel. Welcome. You are in Mountain Time. So it's probably 11:10 p.m. where you are. I have a friend that's in Utah that used to live in Colorado. John Denver's song about Rocky Mountain High is better than John Denver's song about country roads in West Virginia is better than Rocky Mountain High. That's what I meant to say. No sugar tonight in her coffee. No sugar tonight in her tea when she has none. Hello, Angel from Del Mar. Yeah, you should live in Boulder. Boulder! The movie and the book The Shining talks about Boulder. Belgium. I haven't been to Belgium in 20 years. More like 23 years. Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome, Angel. And D. Taylor, I need to rewatch this and we'll copy the link. I'd like to share this with my sister. I'm the oldest child with the most experience with a BPD mother. Yes, we're going to go over more of this as well as time goes on. This was just chapter 1. It gets more interesting than this, honestly. And as long as I don't get a copyright strike for this, I cited the education, but we'll see. Got to make sure that doesn't happen. Don't want that. I would get sleep if it wasn't for your pesky lives being so late for me, Jared. You're like Scooby-Doo. And I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those pesky kids. What would you do without us, though, Cat? You'd be bored. You'd be going back to your old Andrew Wilson loving boyfriend. You can't have that. Andrew Tradcon Wilson. Or what does he consider himself? I don't even know. Truth Thrive says, Detailer, tune in for the Christian John Peter Salerno video. Yes, that will be a good one. That'll be a good one. I think Christian might be a little nervous to be around Dr. Salerno, but Dr. Salerno will be warm and welcoming. I think. I mean, Andrew Wilson just got made a fool of himself, basically. Rightfully so. I mean, he might have even lost the debate. He might have even won the debate, but his emotional tantrum made it seem like he lost. There you go. We don't need any spiraling around here, Cat. No spiraling. We're cool, calm, and collect. We are serene. We are serene here. Yes. So Dr. Salerno, that'll be with that. I'll do another solo video with him too at some point. People should check out the interview I did with Justin Nault today that I uploaded today. It seems like a long time ago now, but I did. Like I said, some people said he sounded a little bit full of himself, but he also had some good knowledge to share, I think. I think there's something to learn from everybody. Andrew Wilson is grifting Christianity and conservatism. And I guess what, though? He's got about 6,000 to 7,000 live stream viewers. And he's got a good business going on with it, I guess. I wish we could give abusive people anti-horny pills so that they don't have sex. Anti-horny pills? It's called an SSRI. Yeah, he was good. I mean, yes, before that was the Josh Connolly. He was a Brit like you, Kat, by the way. Josh Connolly's a Brit. I've got some clients in England as well, Kat, by the way. I've had a couple. Got a couple of folks that talk to me from across the pond. People I've known for years. If it wasn't for this one woman named Zanib, I call her Zanib, but the right way to say it is Zainab. She's the one that encouraged me to continue doing this years ago when it wasn't going as good years ago. So you can thank Zainab, as I affectionately call her, Zanib. And thanks to Thrive for the suggestions there. He found the Christian John video about borderline. That was helpful to go over. He also gave the Dr. Ramani things too. Oh my God, don't take SSRI meds. As soon as it was shutting my body down, I stopped after 3 months, never again. Yeah, they're strong drugs. And mostly what they'll do is they'll mask whatever's going on. In some cases, it can make things, it can be a bit of a support system for people that might need to feel less for a time. But, you know, if it works for people, it works for people. You got it to Thrive. I'm grateful you found it, Greet. Greet for Bovin. Greet for Bovin. Excuse me. Healthy love includes having boundaries with your loved ones. Absolutely it does. Yes, the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect and the Shepherd of Black Sheep does not really recommend SRIs unless absolutely necessary. SNRIs or SSRIs or antipsychotics. I mean, if someone truly needs them, fine. But I prefer natural things first. I'll tell people take supplements, sleep, diet, exercise. Try to go with the earth. Go with the earth first. I was given them years ago to help with my OCD at the time, but I just managed it with willpower now. Yeah, I mean, it seems silly to prescribe you SSRIs for OCD. I mean, honestly, something like lithium orotate, that's a natural version of lithium, that's not a drug, something like that would do much better for people than an SSRI for OCD. The wizard has many concoctions that he can recommend to people. I got OCD, C-PTSD, I'm collecting the alphabet. Not the kind of alphabet you want to collect there, Cat. We should do a book club and read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I would play some One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest if it wouldn't be an automatic copyright strike. But I love that movie. Medication time. Is that what it reminded you of it? Medication time. Good old Nurse Ratched. Nurse Ratched and her covert abuse. And those dark, those beady eyes. Those dead stare eyes. You got to watch out for Nurse Ratched. Nurse Ratched was also in The Exorcist 2, by the way. Got to watch out for Nurse Ratched. Yeah, I'd had C-PTSD. I don't even know if I'd consider myself. I don't know. Do they consider C-PTSD a permanent diagnosis? I'm not sure. Yes, Tooth Lab. We can do that at a point. We can go over some supplements. They're a big baseline of people's health, honestly. If people are struggling with mental health stuff, supplements can be super helpful. There's basics to start, and then you can take it from there. Yes, I believe so. I believe C-PTSD can be healed. It's good to taper the SSRIs. If you can do without them, I say that's better. It's better to be without them if you can. You can heal from it as you stretch your authenticity. I think that's a good way to put it, to thrive. Because, yeah, in the beginning, you might not be able to, but the more you own yourself and accept yourself and you're authentic, the better it will go. I agree. I'm all about the natural. I prefer the natural. One day, I might not be against going on TRT one day, but only because I feel like the diets and whatnot is killing people's testosterone. That's not very good. Singing and laughter, Cat, are two of the most underrated therapies. And they'll help you in a way that no therapy, coaching, or wizardry can, for that matter. No big pharma. This show is not sponsored by Big Pharma. They would not like me. I like singing in my car as a way of relieving stress, especially in the morning when cortisol levels can be high. It's a good way to do it, Danielle. I agree. Stretching the authenticity. Laughter, best therapy for sure. Yes. Glad you found something that helps you. Yes. That's what it's all about. Yeah. I don't personally like weed, but if it helps someone, I'm all for them doing that, if it helps them. Personally, I'd much rather drink a beer, but I don't really do that because hangovers are not good anymore. It wouldn't even take much for me to not feel good, but occasionally I'm not against a celebration. I just haven't for a while. And that's the thing that's better with weed. It's more, you can do it more often, I guess, without the negative side effects. Like drinking, if you drink to get drunk, you're toast. You're toast the next day. Especially as I've gotten older. Oof. And that's what I remember. Ah, she's clean as a whistle over there. All natural. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being all natural. It's a good way to go. Beer. In heaven, there is no beer, Jolly. That's why we drink it here. One beer makes me sleep. My brothers drink beer and want to fight. It's hilarious how it affects us differently. Ooh. The angry junks. You got to watch out for them. They're all a massive cluster B clusterfuck. Yep. Tried it recently again to see if it helps. Pain. Did it? Witnessed a borderlines mask slip. Yes. Not very pretty. The difference is a borderline's mask is much more likely to slip than a narcissist, honestly. But personally, I'm Pisces. Took me a little bit to figure it out, but Sable is cat. Yes, Sable is cat. She used to be called Cat, and then she was something else. Just subscribe. Very good, Angel. Tell your friends. Tell your friend about the channel here. Tell them there's a flock of black sheep you know that are pretty good people. I'm desperately trying to stay off of meds. You have to be your own advocate. I find that I'm currently just staying isolated, less peopling, more nature. I'm all about the less peopling. I lost access somehow. How the hell did that happen? Pisces, old soul, wise, and etc. Well, that's what I am. I don't know what that was, honestly. I mean, a StreamYard glitch. The stream should be back up now. But that might be the time to say, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. The StreamYard gods are saying, no more. No more. Jethro Tull, I love them with Aqua Lung. Played soccer at the kid. Interesting. Yeah, gotta watch The Matrix. Maybe The Matrix didn't like us talking about Big Pharma. That would not surprise me one bit. All right. All right, everybody. It's about time to rock and roll for the night, like I said. But thanks to everyone for participating, commenting, supporting one another. It's always great to see. And I'll probably be back here again tomorrow night. Thanks for the great content and company, Jared, and everyone. We're all happy to help Kat, right, Ellie, Jolly, Greet, Danielle, Angel, To Thrive, Christy, HR, Michelle. Michelle's already gone. Mac, everybody. You know who you are. Appreciate all your support. Tell some more folks, some people that are black sheep, tell them to come on over. With that, ha! Interruption by Pfizer. Pfizer's Viagra. Ah. The Shining was shot in Estes Park, Colorado. My son and I've actually visited the one in Maine as well. There's another version of it. Maybe New Hampshire. Vermont or New Hampshire. I forget which. Crazy. You have a good night too. Good night, everyone.